you are Dr. Adam Wright,
That's me.
and you are an orthopedic surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
and you are the first guest in something that's kind of like the sciences or something to that effect. I'm still figuring out the name of it. But before we get to Dr. Adam Wright, orthopedic surgeon, how about we start with where were you born?
San Antonio, Texas.
All right. So tell me a little bit about being a Texas native and being born in San Antonio, and what was it like growing up in San Antonio?
San Antonio is a great place to grow up. I mean, Texas as well. Lots of things to do for families, and I mean, there's so much fun activities in San Antonio. My family's been Texan since before Texas was a thing. There was actually, Wright that died in the Alamo back in the day, Claiborne Wright, which we're descended from.
No shit.
Yeah.
So you go way back.
Way back in South Texas and San Antonio and all the surrounding hill country.
So tell me about Claiborne Wright, because I'm not familiar with this man, but obviously there's a lineage here, so you probably know a little bit more about him.
Oh, he's
I
about
hope.
great ×5 uncle.
Okay.
And since he died, didn't have any descendants directly, but he was just a soldier there. I think our family had come over from Tennessee, and a lot of people came over that time trying to homestead and get land, and then he started fighting when the revolution happened here.
Did he have a particular rank or anything?
I don't know all those details. I don't know how formal all that was either in the militia.
Okay.
Our family has kind of said that he helped out on some of the medical things and was a soldier. So I'm not sure what his rank was, though, formally.
That's crazy, though.
Yeah. So we've been here a long time and kind of in that area in South Texas as well. So it's been home to my family on both sides, actually. On my mom's side as well, there was several people that fought in the Battle of San Jacinto, which is where Texas won their independence finally.
Okay, so your family is deeply connected to
Texan, yes.
to Texas. So multi-generational, even before Texas was a thing. Does the homestead still exist that Uncle Wright tried to get, I guess?
They had a lot of land out west of San Antonio and some big farms, and they've sold down most of it at this point. We used to run cattle and have a lot of those things, and now people have sort of moved into the city.
Okay. So none of the family still kind of does that part of things?
Not on a huge, not a ton of land like Yellowstone or anything like that.
Okay.
We'll have small bits here and there, 40, 50 acres.
Which Yellowstone seems like an over-exaggeration of what the regular rancher looks like.
Yeah.
I don't feel like most ranchers have, what is it, like 1 million acres or something that this guy has in the film,
it's incredible.
in the TV show?
I mean, the King Ranch is a big deal, and then 4 Sixes is a big deal too. But I don't know that it's one person owning and making all the decisions. That's more dramatic, and
right.
A lot of people would be required to run all that too.
It seems like a big ranch like that would be like a multi-conglomerate of people, or at least organizations, probably.
Yep.
That maybe even investor groups that come in and kind of like.
I mean, the King Ranch in South Texas is a big deal too.
So I'm not familiar with that. What's the King Ranch?
It's I think the largest ranch in the world.
Is it really?
But I mean, you've heard of like a King Ranch truck, right?
I have not.
So
should I have? Is this a Texas thing that I shouldn't?
It's a Texas thing, but it's more than just Texas. So Ford, one of their like tiers of luxury pickups and Expeditions, bigger cars, is the King Ranch version.
Oh, and interesting.
It's a kind of orange brown Texas leather finish on the inside. It looks really nice, but it's named after the King Ranch in South Texas, and they have huge agriculture, a lot of cattle. I think they have their own brand of cattle and all sorts of different plants, and it's closer to the coast, so it's south of San Antonio even, but it's a big ecosystem all on its own.
Okay, so now I just learned something completely new about Texas. I had no, I there's so much I don't know about this state because I'm a new resident. I would say even like under 2 years is not long enough to kind of even get an idea of what Texas is like.
Well, I guarantee driving home you're going to see a King Ranch truck and
probably
then know. Oh yeah,
I've seen Texas edition of cars before, and I always wondered. I was like, are we really that special that we get our own edition of like a Ford or a Chevy or a Dodge or somebody? Like, I'm sure there's multiple American car manufacturers that do a Texas version of something.
So Chevy's got the Texas edition, and then Toyota, their Tundra, they have, I think, the 1794 package.
Okay.
Which is made in Texas and made south of San Antonio. And that ranch that they bought to make their plant was established in 1794. And the 1794 package competes with the King Ranch edition.
There's so much like small little things about this state that people don't know about.
Oh yeah,
insane.
Especially Texans and their trucks. You know, we care about those.
Can you explain that to me as a multi-generational Texan? Like, why is there this almost the same level of hate for each other as sports team rivalries? Like, if you're a Ford guy and somebody's a Chevy guy, and there's like this deep-seated hate for certain people, and you're like, I don't get it.
Especially the truck guys. I mean, I've seen, you know, a Corvette guy will walk up to a guy with a Mustang and be like, oh, cool car, man. But all the truck guys like, oh, yeah, Dodges are the worst, you know. And there is a strange loyalty to it. But, I mean, I
see, like, bumper stickers and stuff of people just, like, shitting on another car manufacturer, you know, just, like, funny things. Like memes before memes were a thing.
Oh yeah,
it seemed like they were on back of bumpers on cars in Texas, especially the trucks, going like
there's lots
hate
of
Ford and this and that.
There's a little guy caricature that was always peeing on the logo of a Ford or a Chevy.
I remember those when I know you remember because we're in the same age bracket, but like in school that was a big thing of like the dude peeing on something,
yes.
And like whoever the cool kids were that had cars when they were 16 and 17 would always get a sticker of like rival basketball team or the football team for the high school, and it's like peeing on their mascot or their logo. You remember? Did they have that here in Texas too? I'm sure
we did. What was the cool car in your high school?
So in my high school, I know that there was one dude that had an F-150 Harley Davidson edition.
Okay, yeah,
because his dad got him that as a gift when he turned 16, and that was considered one of the cool cars. But I came up in LA at a time where a lot of guys, when they had a car, and especially if they had a part-time job or something, were into the whole tuning thing. So, because like the Fast and Furious was a big deal. So Rice Rockets were a big deal. A lot of people had the Honda CRVs, I think, or
the Civics.
The Civics, but then there was like a little bit smaller version. I think I forget what three-letter abbreviation was used for those. But
I know which one you're talking about.
Those were literally called the Rice Rockets because they had like these tiny engines that would just make a ton of noise, and you can modify them and strip them out, and people would go nuts with them. So that was our big deal. But growing up in Glendale, which is kind of like more of an affluent neighborhood, so I don't know, a bunch of kids had BMWs and Mercedes and Volvos and things like that, just like a parental car that was passed down to them, or just given to them as a gift when they turned 16. Like, here's a BMW 3 Series. Have fun.
I don't know that anybody in my neighborhood had that. Our school had an ag magnet program, so you could actually raise cattle on campus, and pigs and chickens.
So
and
agricultural magnet program.
Yes.
See, in LA, our schools that had magnet programs focused on either medicine and science or like computers and technology. So there was two main ones, Bravo, which was in downtown LA, and then there was Clark Magnet, which was in La Crescenta. Clark was science and technology. Bravo was medicine and technology. Those were the two predominant magnets in my local area.
Most of the high schools in our district were a magnet for something. So ours was agriculture, and other schools was robotics. There actually was a school for people that wanted to go into medicine. And then there's an arts one and a performing arts. So it just depends on which high school you went to.
Which is one of the things that, for people that don't know Texas, they think oil and cows is the first two things that comes to mind. But then you're like, hang on a second. Remember Texas Instruments? Like that whole humongous company, one of the largest chip manufacturers ever.
And Dell.
And Dell. And you have so many companies that were either birthed or considered their home to be Texas, and they're like these humongous tech companies. Not to take away from the oil companies. I mean, there's a city I visited called Lubbock.
Yes.
And you're like, you don't actually make any sense. Why are you so robust of an infrastructure for so little amount of people? And then you read into it and you're like, oh, because they have 4 of the largest hospitals within 4 states. Mm-hmm. They are the only Trauma 1 burn center in 4 states.
Yep.
And then they're like, we also do all this oil stuff here.
And they have a university, you know.
Yeah, isn't there like 2 universities there?
Texas Tech is the main
Yeah.
one.
And
A lot
it's
of these have smaller private
huge.
universities too,
But Texas Tech is massive. I think I read some weird estimate that it's like 200,000 people live in Lubbock, but like a couple of million people either temporarily reside there or visit there on a yearly basis.
it's like College Station too.
I've never been there.
You would love it.
Would I really?
It's fun. I mean, I'm very biased to being an Aggie. That's a big Texas rivalry is the Aggies versus the Longhorns.
Okay.
But that's where I went, and it's a college town that the population just doubles or triples on game day weekends where everyone's coming in. Fitting 100,000 people in the stadium.
That's the other
There's
thing.
only 70,000 students.
That's the other thing is like when I drove by a high school stadium that had like 10,000 plus seats, I was like, this is insane. And like, yeah, this isn't special. This is normal in Texas. There's
Right.
a lot of these.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, what do you mean? Our high school was maybe 1,000 people, 2,000 total, could sit at a football. Nobody cares in LA. That's the other thing. It's like high school sports, college sports. Yeah, they're great, but who cares, honestly? Here, it's a huge thing. Like, people get really into their teams.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's what you do on a Friday night. The town's right around everybody, and people are talking about the quarterback and who's the wide receiver squad that we got this year. It's a big deal.
And was San Antonio kind of like that, too?
It was. Our school was pretty good. I don't know if you ever saw the TV series Friday Night Lights.
I saw the movie,
So
which I loved.
Yeah, and the movie's awesome. There's a TV series too that came afterwards, and that was somewhat inspired by something that happened at my school. Not to spoil it for you, but
Don't worry about it.
One of the
It's only 25 years old
Yeah,
or something
exactly,
at this point.
So at least in the show, I think it's the quarterback. He breaks his neck in a game.
Okay.
And so it's just kind of all the drama and the quarterback and his family and the coach and all that. And so it's a good show. But that happened because my high school was playing a team from Austin, and there were some producers whose kids were on the team. And a guy from my high school actually broke his neck playing. And so
it's kind of loosely based off of that dude.
yeah, at least that idea from it was.
And was this an injury like severe
Oh, yeah,
as
he's
it
paralyzed.
sounds? So he became paralyzed.
Yes.
Damn.
And-
Like quadriplegic, or how bad was it?
I don't remember what function he had of his upper extremities, but lower extremities was nothing. He was wheelchair bound. And
Wow.
the school really rallied around him, and he's great kid he was before, and he graduated I think a year late. His name was David Edwards, and so I think one of the stadiums or something's named after him now. And he lived for several years after that, and I think he died from pneumonia or something for a while later. But he's great guy, and it's just tragic to see that happen. But it inspired the story.
So, rest in peace, David Edwards, to the Edwards family. Sorry for your loss. I know it's 2 or 3 decades at this point, or maybe.
Probably about 2.
So, damn. But, I mean, he does live on in your memory, especially, and the movies and film and people like that. It's very interesting how something that can happen. And San Antonio is not a small town, but relatively speaking, it's a smaller city.
It feels like one for
Yeah.
Texas.
How something like that can inspire the entire country. And because anybody that's seen the Friday Night Lights film or the TV series really got to oh wow, this is us, this is America, this is what it's all about. Small town, people rallying together, kind of thing. I love inspirational films like that. It's so funny that we lose sight of that on a regular basis until something like that. You're like, but we're all Americans. Look, we're all friends.
It's hard because I feel like the community that we all think that we live in, you feel so distant from people. And when something like that happens, it really brings people together.
Definitely. But I mean, Texas is different, at least from my own experience when I first moved here and kind of went through my own weird, almost dying situation. And I was like, what do I do now? Because I don't know anybody here and was completely alone. And I just literally texted you. And I was like, hey, man, sorry, I know we don't know each other, but here's what happened. What do I do? And I wasn't expecting, and I don't know if this is just the way you were brought up or this is just Texans in general, but you literally dropped everything and came to make sure I was okay. And I will forever be grateful for that. And it was weird for us because I literally remember talking to my wife later that day going shit, we lived in a neighborhood in California that had a bunch of doctors, but I would never feel comfortable texting any of them in a situation like that because they would kind of never be there for you. And I was like, look at this situation where I literally met this guy a month ago. You know, we're neighbors, next door neighbors, literally. And I was like, I texted him, and he was about to take a trip with his family, and he dropped everything and came to make sure I was okay. I don't know. It was one of those things. I was like, maybe community still exists. Maybe it still has a fighting chance of being there, where we can be neighbors and be friends and look out for one another, versus what we got in California, which was a big disconnect from that.
Yeah.
Which is strange to say, because I didn't live in like greater Los Angeles. I lived in a smaller city, relative, suburb, but you still got that disconnect because nobody kind of has that community. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, we all grew up hearing about like the American way, like new neighbor moves in and people come over and welcome them to the neighborhood, all that kind of stuff. None of that existed from where we came from. And then we came here and it was like, oh, wow, that does exist. And people are friendly and neighborly with one another. And kids go outside and play. And I was like, this is so strange to us. It's weird.
I think that's a normal Texas thing. I mean, at least it's been that way the places I've been.
I mean, I've gotten that kind of attention and care from you as my neighbor, but broadly, just from Texans in general, people seem to care here. People seem to be genuinely nice here without wanting anything in return other than just be respectful to me and be nice to me.
There's a lot of natural disasters at times in Texas. I mean, the fires we had a couple months ago. I mean, when I was actually living in Houston during Hurricane Harvey, and I mean, people's homes were flooded, and people from all over Texas and really all over the South came in on their boats, their bass boats, to pull people out of their houses and rescue people. I think when you live in a state that has some extreme weather, you realize how much you're at the mercy of nature and how much you need the people around you. It's a yearly reminder, when hail and tornadoes and 100-degree weather, and it comes at you, and you realize, hey, you could be in that position. So I think we're faced with our own humanity frequently. When you do that, it keeps you humble.
I remember we had the freeze happen.
Oh yeah.
Not this year, but the year before. Mm-hmm. And I remember you and I would just be randomly texting each other. Hey man, I'm about to make a store run. Need anything?
Yeah.
Like both of us shouldn't be on these streets. At least if one of us is going to be there, I can pick up stuff from your house. Right. You can pick up stuff from my house. And it was hilarious because I remember like just texting you going like, do you need anything? Is everything okay? And I remember like everybody in my house was sick. Everybody in your house was sick except for you and I. And both of us were just sitting there going like, we'll figure it out. I'm sure we'll make it work somehow.
Man, I forgot about that.
That was hilarious, dude. Like I remember every night one of us would be texting the other going like, how's your family holding up today? And you'd be like,
who's got a fever this morning?
Yeah. And we were both just kind of going through it, and it was like a piggyback. You were like, my wife's sick, now the kids are sick, now the kids are better, but my wife is still sick. Now it just didn't stop for like 2 weeks.
Man, when you're all cooped up together, it's just not going to get any better.
What's funny is that like neither one of us ended up getting sick.
No, we survived somehow. Maybe it's because we're going out and
I don't know what it was, but it was just like someone was looking down and going like, both of you need to kind of be relatively healthy because all of you sick doesn't work at all.
That's what happened when we got COVID for the first time. It was somewhat sequential. I think I got it first, like the symptoms, and then by the time I was getting over it, then Joy came down with it. So it was nice that at least somebody was functional to take care of the kids.
I remember when my wife got COVID, it skipped me first, and then she got better, but had no sense of smell or taste for like 2 months.
Yep.
And then I got COVID, but I didn't get any of like the long term or lose of taste or smelling. I just was like knocked off my feet for 3 days, to the point where I couldn't go upstairs. I would get winded just going upstairs, and I was like, what the hell is going on?
Exactly.
Like, I just went up a flight of stairs.
Yeah, the smell thing was real. That's how I knew that I really had it. I had like tested positive because my mom got sick, so I got tested like at the hospital before I walked in to do the surgery. I was like, hey, send somebody out to test me. I think I might have COVID. So they came out and tested me. It was positive, and so I had to go home and cancel the surgery for a couple weeks. And so I was just sitting at the house, had nothing else to do. And the next morning I was like, well, I'm going to smoke some pork butt. And so I turned on my grill, and I'm like, I swear I lit the fire, and I turn on, there's smoke coming out, and put my face right in it.
Nothing, right?
At all. I was like, okay, this is real.
My poor wife, for like a month and a half straight, she was just like, everything tastes like cardboard. She's like, nothing has any flavor, nothing has any taste. It was weird. And then it kind of also translated into the food we were eating at home because she had no idea of like,
if it's good or
is
not.
anything seasoned okay?
Yeah. I remember eating spicy Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches until my taste came back just to know, like, all right.
Something's got to trigger it, right? No, it was hilarious. So what's the protocol now with COVID? Do you guys need to isolate? What happens? Because, I mean, I've gotten COVID like 4 times in the last year and a half and ignored it completely because I was just like, but this is easier than the cold or the flu. It's saying I'm positive, but I feel fine.
Right. I think at this point, I just try and let rational thought prevail. If you're sick and you think you're contagious, don't be at work. Don't get people sick, especially, me, I'm taking care of elderly people. I don't want to get them sick.
Right.
But if you feel okay, and I mean, heck, people will be sick and have a stuffy nose for a week or 2 after. Like, that doesn't mean you can't go to work, I don't think, But if you've got a fever, if you're throwing up, I mean, if you're contagious, like, don't come in. And that's sort of how we treat it. Now, there are certain times where, like, say you've got to get a surgery done, right? I mean, deductibles typically reset January 1st. And a couple of years ago, I got sick like January or December 30th, and that was my last OR day. I tested negative for COVID, so I'm like, I guess I can be in the building. But I had completely lost my voice, so I couldn't speak at all, which is hard to do a surgery. Sometimes there's a lot of talking involved in that. But fortunately, my team was the same team that's with me every day, and so I could just put my hand behind me, and they'd put the right tool in my hand because they knew it came next.
Wow. So, I mean, that probably makes a huge difference, knowing that you've been working with a crew for an extended period of time, and they are an extension of you in that OR room.
Your surgeries go by faster, and there will be times where I'll put my hand back and I'll call for a tool. It probably wasn't the right one, and they will know where I am in the case, and they will be seeing the same problem that I'm seeing, and they'll usually just hand me the right one, even if it's not what I called for.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
When you develop a good team, they anticipate those things, and they can see what you really need, and they can see what's going on, and when they've seen enough of these surgeries, they know what's coming up next.
Okay. So I'm going to take a step back before we go into full-on you as an orthopedic surgeon. Let's go back to San Antonio, and I know you have a brother. Any other siblings that I don't know about?
So I have...
Because I've met your brother. So.
Yes.
So you have another brother I haven't
2.
met.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So there's the youngest brother. He's 9 years younger than me, and then there's one that's 3 years younger than me.
And I met the one that's 9 years younger, correct?
Yes, he's taller than me. So.
He's the one in finance.
Yes.
Yeah. Really nice guy.
Oh, yeah. He's a lot like me in a lot of ways.
But he's 9 years younger.
He's 9 years younger.
And the one 3 years younger is polar opposites from what I've heard.
He's very much like my dad. So they look similar, and they kind of act the same way. He's different. He thinks in a different way. He's like musically very gifted. School is never like his big thing, but like physically, musically, he's very talented.
Was your pops the same way, musically talented or artistically talented?
He is too. But they both have like ADHD and dyslexia, and so they struggle with some of the textbook stuff.
That's why I like your dad so much.
Yeah,
I have the ADHD. I don't know if dyslexia ever got diagnosed for me or not, but at this point I've kind of probably worked around it enough.
Right.
I hated reading, still do. I love learning, and I love when I'm able to actually get into a book, but it is such an uphill battle for me to actually read that I find myself more than likely just going to an audiobook.
Well, some people just process things differently. And I think we are at a point now where we know that enough about people that's more acceptable, and just the resources are easier. I mean, if you and I wanted to listen to an audiobook when we were teenagers, you'd have to have a whole stack of CDs. And
it was a bit of a struggle, yeah. It was a bit of work to kind of be able to do that. I mean, I know both of us went through like the iPod generation and that whole thing, but it took a while before... like Audible was a thing, or books on like digitally, Amazon turning their ebook services or the audiobook services. All that stuff kind of came in later. The main focus was how do we get music, and a ton of music onto something that's smaller than a Walkman or a CD player was kind of the original thing that we were all hunting for. And they used to make them like a really tiny with no screens, the shuffle and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, cool. This is fun. This is awesome. And then we got like the revolution. Because I remember like podcasts as an idea existed forever, but nobody was really into them because nobody could figure out how to monetize them in any way. Nobody really thought that it was a viable thing. And it took a long time to get there. I think audiobooks kind of went through the same
Yeah, they were basically
process.
Podcasts were basically just radio shows that they put on a series.
Yeah. That's kind of what they originally started as, was like, and I remember it was the same time frame as when Sirius and XM were trying to do the whole satellite radio thing, and radio itself was trying to survive because they were losing market share too. All of us having MP3 players and not caring about all that stuff, and
pirating our music.
Yeah, I mean, we none of us actually understood what we were doing.
Yeah,
is I think a strong opinion to have in regards to that, because we all understood like pirating, and maybe there's like a gray area of it, but nobody really thought it was just like this really bad thing to do. I still don't see it as a bad thing to do. I feel like the music industry was just really late to adopt it and turn it into a viable option for us.
There were the business model was different too.
Yeah,
you could only buy like an entire CD, and if you wanted to get the file and like put it on if you only wanted one song from 15 track CD, and you have to like take that file off somehow and transfer it. And I mean, like at the beginning, it was just easier. It wasn't even, you didn't think of it as an ethical thing. Sometimes it was just, hey, I'm trying to make this playlist. How do I do it?
Yeah, it was what the upgrade of the mixtape was.
Right.
It became like whatever your playlist was.
Right. If you, I used to record songs off the radio.
We did, yeah, I did that too. So, like a little tape deck.
Right, but that didn't feel like piracy, right? That doesn't feel wrong.
Honestly, that one felt worse than actually downloading from Napster or LimeWire or one of those websites, because I was just a different, like you were actually doing it when you recorded it.
It was more work.
Yeah.
And you got to cut the commercials out just right, But
and the music was never that good because it was a radio edit. So it always had, all the words that you wanted to fully listen to kind of blocked out.
Yeah.
And it will, and sometimes you're right. Like there's a commercial or you don't catch it correctly. So like the end of your tape had some random commercial starting out, and it was fun, but it was kind of like more of an exploration than it was just straight up touch a button and get all the songs you want.
Right.
But yeah, I remember how much easier it became to, I don't want the entire Tupac album. I want just these 3 songs that I think are cool, and you would get that and you'd mix it with something else and you're like, now I got something to listen to. It was fun, but I don't know, like none of us really knew that we were doing something horrible about it. I still don't feel like we did anything horrible about it. They just made it seem like just the worst thing ever.
Right.
And then the older we got, the smarter we got. We were just like, well, you were just a nefarious organization to begin with that was screwing over artists, and all you cared about was the amount of money you could keep.
Yeah.
And this is why like SoundCloud is a huge thing now. Independent people, making their name without going through record labels.
Well, and having Spotify, I think, makes it just easier for everybody to be able to access things, and then the artists are actually getting paid. And I don't think anybody wants to be stealing anything, and I think a lot of people just didn't see downloading things from Napster as actually stealing a product.
Yeah, none of us really thought of it as theft.
Right.
In the technical term of it, even though it is, if you look at it broadly, like someone created work that had a value to it and you stole it without paying for that value.
But you could record it off the radio, and that's not wrong.
Right.
So I think that's why there was that disconnect. Is well, what's wrong about recording it off the radio and having it on tape versus just clicking a button and now it's a file I have?
Well, the other thing is also that if you purchased the album, then you could have downloaded any of the songs you wanted from Napster, and you would not be breaking any law. Because I own the original content. This is just for my own personal use. I want a copy of it.
Yeah.
That's legal.
So there's a file sharing app when I was in college. There's some sort of network thing where once you plugged into the network, everyone's computers were connected.
Okay.
And so whatever anyone had, you could just take. Like whatever they put on basically the shared network drive. So it was basically like if your buddy loaned you a CD and you just burned it.
Okay, yeah.
So that would probably technically be piracy, but if your friend loans you a CD and you burn it, is that piracy? Like, it's such a gray area.
It's a weird, yeah, I completely agree with you. And that was the thing, is like, You shouldn't be downloading from Napster, but you can burn CDs and nobody would give you any problems for it whatsoever.
Right.
Like I remember having one of those CD things, CD cases, just like flipping through, and almost all of them were burned CDs.
Oh yeah.
At some point or another, and you're like, okay.
I found one of those the other day from like back in the day.
An old burned CD.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and some like real CDs too, but I mean, it's been in the garage, and I guess my truck has a CD player, but
does it still?
Yeah, just a single CD.
It's funny, like I stopped realizing when they didn't put them in cars anymore, because it was just like a thin slit in the radio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before it was the tape deck was a much larger thing, and it catches your eye every time you see. You're like, oh, there's a tape deck there. Now you get a car and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. You guys don't do this anymore.
Right.
Like this entire industry went to death.
Computers too. I mean, there's no optical drives at all, which becomes a problem if you were ever trying to like look at a disc that someone's brought that's got an X-ray or an MRI or anything on there. You just can't get into it unless you have a reader.
Which is very specific to kind of like the medical industry, which I've learned this from kind of being just an ancillary person in the medical field for over a decade now. A lot of the systems are so old.
Oh yeah,
they're just so old.
We're the only people that still like use pagers and fax machines, and it's critical for life.
I mean, not pagers for us, but if we didn't have a fax number, we could not operate at all.
When I was a resident, I mean, which was not that long ago, it's still everybody had a pager. You had your personal pager, and then you had, like, when you were on call for orthopedics, there was the ortho pager.
And it was like one of those bigger, thick bricks, right? That
yeah,
kind of actually gave you messages on there.
Yes, and it would call. Certain things would be automated, you know, like if a trauma was coming in, they'd give you some details, but it would basically just be a phone number to call. And you could tell, you knew which ones were the ER. You have them memorized, like, oh, yes, this is an ER number, you know.
Something like, oh, great, I got to
go
to work.
And you'd be like, oh, yes, this is going to be a new console or something I got to deal with. And you knew, like, there's a what we call the PAN nurse, which is the patient advisory nurse line, which is just like patient questions that they'd call in. And it'd always be like at the worst time. And the PAN nurse thought that they were the most important person in the entire world. And, you know, the patients are usually asking a question like, hey, can I take an extra stool softener? Not something complicated. But they would, like, page you when, like, someone's bones are sticking out of their leg. And then if you didn't answer quick enough, they would, like, report you to your program director for ignoring them. And you're like, no, I'm dealing with real-life stuff going on right now. This question, I'm sure, is not critical, because if it was critical, they'd be in the ER. You can wait 5 minutes. Like, calm down.
Yeah. People don't seem to think that what they have going on is any less priority than what you have going on.
Right.
And I've never understood that. Doctors do a certain thing, and then everybody under them is supposed to be supporting that thing. But a lot of times they just feel like they are above the doctor in some way, and they are priority one, and you're like, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
That person has a ton of stuff in their head for a reason. They're probably like trying to, you know, deal with multiple different issues at the same time, and stool softener is not high on that priority list.
Right. Well, and patients sometimes too, I think, just don't see the whole picture. They know what's going on with them, you know, and they know that they want to get through their appointment immediately, but maybe the doctor's running late because they just told the person before you that they have cancer and they don't have very long to live. I mean, that happens. So just having a little grace and understanding for everybody.
Yeah, well, I wish we had a little bit more patience and empathy for each other, but that we don't live in that world, unfortunately.
I tried to still have a soft heart when I can.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you come from a different side of the world where you're dealing with people that, you know, most people don't come to you when they're in their happiest of times. They almost always come to you when they're in their worst of times, because now they need orthopedic surgery. It's true. And there's recovery involved in it. And you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, certain doctors deal with the happier side of the world. Other doctors, not so much. I mean, it's not as bad as oncology probably or cardiology, but it's not as good as being an OBGYN dealing with pregnant people all day. Most pregnant people are like happy to be there. It's usually a choice.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. I would disagree.
Okay.
I think now an orthopedic trauma patient's a different deal.
Okay.
You know, if you've fallen and broken a bone, like that's very often the worst day of your life. But those people are still very thankful once they are fixed, you know.
That I agree with. No, I mean, in the initial kind of getting to you, maybe not in your world where, because orthopedic surgery, yours are all scheduled, there's a lot of follow-up, and maybe the trauma one is kind of what I was leaning towards more. And ER doctors definitely don't have the happy side of the world usually.
Right. And, there are bad reasons why people get hurt very often. We always say that trauma is a disease. It's not typical that it's a normal person. It's usually somebody who was drunk or in a fight, or who was run from the police who got shot. I mean, there's all of those type of people. Now, the normal people still fall and hurt themselves on a skateboard or chasing their kids and doing that, but
taking down Christmas decorations or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've seen a lot of that, but it's not always that person. It's sometimes a person who is belligerent and drunk and trying to punch you while you're helping them, and that's the hard side of it.
Did you deal with a lot of that stuff? I mean, now, as I guess in the practice, but a lot more in residency, I'm guessing, or when you're doing. Did you do a fellowship or?
I did, yes. So my fellowship was in what was called adult reconstruction or hip and knee replacement. Putting arthritis and tilt joints and those sort of things.
Okay.
But in residency, you're exposed to everything.
And you work these like horrible hours, right? Like 16-hour shifts and 20-hour shifts and sleeping at the hospital.
Pretty short.
16 would be short.
Yes. So, I mean, like you'd show up for work, get to the hospital at 4 or 5 in the morning, and then you'd work either a day in the OR or a day in clinic, and then you'd be on call the whole night, and then you'd work the next day too. So I don't know what that would come out to, but usually
seems like 36 plus hours of just like being on like call.
And maybe you'd get and you wouldn't be on call usually the whole time, probably only about 24 hours of that at max.
Okay.
But then you'd still have just your regular responsibilities to work with, and the people that are working with you are trying to get you home if they can, but sometimes you're the only person that they have to help them, and they got to get through their day too.
So how does that actually work? If let's say you clock in at 5 a.m., are you working nonstop, or are they requiring you to like take a break and sleep at some point, even though you're still at the hospital?
It depends. I mean, if nothing's happening, like if it was the first cold night in wintertime,
okay,
I knew this is going to be a good night. Like the old people aren't going to go outside. They're not going to fall. Nobody's going to get in a fight. Nobody's getting drunk. Like it's going to be great. Like I might get some sleep tonight, and maybe you get 4 or 5 hours. Like every once in a while, somebody'd have a no-hitter where like they don't get called for anything, but sometimes, especially in the summertime, if it's warm or if you've had a fresh rain, people are going to be crashing, falling, fighting. So you're probably not going to get any sleep. And there's no break because the work just keeps coming in. Now, if you need help, you can call another resident that's on call too as your backup to come in and help you. And every once in a while that has to happen, especially in a mass casualty scenario. But if you're the junior level resident, you are seeing all these new patients, kind of triaging them, getting them ready for surgery the next day, or deciding, hey, I think this might need to be elevated to the resident above me or the staff that's on call to say, does this need to go to the OR right now? And there are certain things that are orthopedic emergencies, and it's important to know what those are. But usually if you were the chief resident or the staff on call, you probably weren't going to have to go in. It was maybe 50-50 chance, just depending on what was happening.
Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. And what's the logic for the hospital? Because, I mean, don't they feel like at some point, your faculty is kind of diminishing as you're on your feet for 25 and 30 and 40 plus hours of a shift?
This is how it's always been done. And
is there any logic to it? Is there any rhyme or reason for it? Because it's like I don't think you're ever in a situation where you're in surgery for 20 plus hours
not
now,
anymore,
right?
But you have. It could happen, and you have to know how to deal with it, and you have to be good on your feet. You certainly learn a lot about yourself and a lot about prioritizing things and time management. So there are good lessons that are learned during that, and there's all sorts of ways to skin a cat too. At different programs, they would do what was called a night float system, where you would just be on nights for 6 weeks or 3 months, and you would just take turns doing that. So that would probably give you more sleep. And I thought at first that is the way that I want to do it. But I rotated at some programs that did that. And those guys were miserable because they didn't see anybody they knew for 6 weeks or 3 months because they were only waking up at night and just dealing with the craziness all the time. So to me, it was preferable to do something like that, just work a crazy night every 4 or 5 days, and then you can still sort of live a regular life the rest of the time. And the way that our program did it was they focused it in on mostly 1 year where you had to work really hard like that, where you had to be the guy that was in the hospital. And then after that, you got to be the backup person. So they sort of contained the craziness.
So when you're doing your residency, have you decided what your discipline in medicine is, and that's what your residence is in, or is it a general residency?
No, you can have a general like intern year of something surgical, but now at this point, especially for orthopedics, I think it's like 9 months of your 12-month internship is still orthopedic related.
Okay. So a little bit different from what my understanding was that you become a resident, they throw you into a hospital, and they're like, sorry for the term, but you're the bitch. Now you got to do everything for everyone at all times.
Well, you definitely are that. That's true.
Okay.
But you don't have to do things for the internal medicine doctors or the cardiologists if you're the orthopedic resident, unless you're on a cardiology rotation. So they rotate you around. So that first year, you do like plastic surgery, general surgery, trauma, some pediatric surgery, ICU. So you rotate around all these things that orthopedics has dealings with, so that you know what they're thinking about and you know the way they do things, and you get to know the people that are on that team. It's great because you're going to be there as a resident for 5 years, so you get to know their attendings, you get to know their team, their nurses, so that way when you need help, if one of your patients has a vascular injury, you know exactly who to call, and you've worked with them before.
So you said 5 years for residency?
5 years for residency.
I didn't know it was that long. I thought it was a couple of years.
No, for orthopedics, it's 5. Other things might be 3. Family practice is 3, internal medicine is 3, and then there's a fellowship on top of that if you want to do that. And most orthopedic surgeons do, especially if you want to be a competitive market. You need fellowship training of some sort.
So it's 5 plus a fellow.
5 plus a fellowship. Mm-hmm.
And fellowships are usually a year or 2?
In orthopedics, they're a year or 2.
Okay.
And other things, they're 3.
Yeah, I know like neurosurgery guys have it the worst, right? There's the longest of
their
everybody.
Their residency is 7 years, and then there's fellowship on top of that. And I think those fellowships are normally 1 year as well. But like general surgery, their residency is 5 years. A lot of times if they want to get into a competitive fellowship, they do 2 years of research in the middle of their residency, and then they'll do a 2 or 3 year fellowship.
So what does a competitive fellowship mean? And I mean, so explain that whole thing to, I guess, those of us that have no understanding. I know the word fellowship because of a few friends that are physicians that I just kind of learned, a few interesting words here and there. But do all physicians go through a fellowship?
No, they don't. And you don't have to in certain things. I mean, like, there are fellowships off of every branch of medicine for the most part. But, it's just what you want to do. Some people, they do an internal medicine residency and they love practicing internal medicine. They round on people in the hospital and they take care of that. And that's great. And a lot of people will be what's called a hospitalist. So they just work 12 hours at the hospital and go home. So, I mean, that's great. But if you want to be a cardiologist, then you do an extra 3 years after that internal medicine residency. So you can specialize in the heart or, GI or infectious disease. And there are reasons why people would go to one fellowship or another, one type, I mean.
What is the primary reason? So let's circle it back to you. You're going in San Antonio, you graduate high school, you're going to college. At this point, are you thinking of becoming a doctor, or
Yes.
is it not your plan yet?
No, I wanted to be a surgeon from like age 10.
What started that? Is there so I ask this question usually with comedians of, what made you get on stage the first time is what I ask them. But if with a physician, it's a much more drawn out kind of like you need to put multi-year of schooling before anybody ever lets you hold a scalpel.
Right.
So what was age 10? What kind of put you on that path? And we'll go back to the fellowship part of it because I think it all kind of ties in together.
Yeah. So I had a brother that had cerebral palsy and a lot of medical conditions. And so taking care of him was a full-time job for my family.
Was this fourth brother, I'm guessing?
This is the third.
Third.
So between the other two.
Okay.
He passed away when he was 17.
So there's 4 of you total.
So there were 4 of us, yeah. So
Sorry for your
No,
loss.
he's with the Lord now, and he is not suffering, and so we're not worried about him. We're sad that he's gone, but he's in a better place.
I have some questions in relation to that, but we'll get to that.
Sure.
Please continue.
So there's a lot of doctors that we saw, and I was homeschooled for part of that time. or would just go with my parents to appointments because they're trying to figure out what's wrong with them. And there were a lot of doctors that were great and took great care of us and really comforted us when we went through hard times. And then there were doctors that we were just a number or the next patient, and you could tell they didn't enjoy their job. And I loved science and all, math and all those disciplines. But then I actually got to witness open heart surgery at age 10.
On your brother?
No, on just somebody else.
Okay.
I was able to go observe surgery with one of my friend's dads, who's a perfusionist, who runs the heart and lung bypass machine.
What is a perfusionist?
They're a PA.
Okay, like a physician assistant.
Yes, but they're specifically trained to run this machine that keeps you alive when your heart's not beating.
Is it like a bypass machine?
Yes,
kind of?
yeah, the bypass machine.
So we've all seen like
Right.
videos in movies and stuff where it's like you got these weird disc spinning things,
yeah.
and are they like that in
Yes.
reality?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't seen one in a while, but that's what they looked like last time I saw them.
Okay, wow, that's crazy.
But yeah, he ran that, and so his son was interested in medicine, and I was too. And so I said, well, why don't you just kind of come observe what we do? And I saw heart surgery and thought, that is the coolest thing. I want to do that. I want to be able to take a difficult problem and focus in on it and fix it, and then people don't have to worry about that problem for the rest of their life. So originally I wanted to do heart surgery and be a cardiothoracic surgeon. That's why I told everybody it was going to be forever.
Which is nuts because like most 10-year-olds would see that, would have like a serious aversion to ever seeing something like that ever again, because you're literally looking at a person's chest being broken apart. There's literally a hammer at some point or a saw cutting through what is this, big bone that is protecting almost all of your important vital organs, heart, lung, all of that is protected here through your chest. And you got to break that cavity open, shift everything apart, and then you're like, let's have fun.
So being a Texan, I did a lot of hunting even as a kid, and would help my, grandpa and my dad process the meat from the deer that we killed.
Okay, so you're used to...
somewhat. Is used to that, and the muscles and all that, and cracking up with the rib cage and all those things that when you're processing meat. So to me, it was a little more mechanical. The shock value was a little less. Like this was a person, it was breathing, it was different. But I guess some of those things I had already been exposed to in anatomy and all that I already enjoyed.
So that...
Even at 10, simply because you got to know your anatomy to make a good cut of meat and cut it out right.
Right, which is, I guess, what anybody from California or, a big city may not know any of that stuff, is that kids here, and still today, I would say, in a lot of Texas, and probably a lot of the country, are exposed to a lot of things that kids aren't exposed to in a big city, where you're going to a supermarket to buy food versus here you might go out with your grandpa, your uncles, and your dad, do a hunt, and at some point, you're given a pocket knife, and you're like, all right, well, come on, little Adam, time to learn.
Exactly.
And now you're learning how to skin an animal and treat it. I think there's a much better connection to the world at large when you do have those experiences at a younger age versus buying chicken at a supermarket, and you have this complete disconnect between you and your food. And I didn't think that it would translate into someone becoming a physician as part of that. But the reason I asked the question is because now I'm getting a whole picture of hunting with the family, seeing a cardiologist do, magic for a 10-year-old, like, cutting a person completely apart and then putting him back together and saying, you'll be okay in a few weeks. That's got to be magical for a 10-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
And then on top of that, having your own, and I know this word gets thrown around, but people don't like sometimes to apply the word, but trauma of dealing with a family member, especially a brother who's going through his own medical conditions and eventually succumbs to those and passes away. And that's what kind of gives me this whole picture of why Adam became a physician, is like there's a whole host of events that occurred in life that set you up for it.
Right.
Would that be a good observation to
I think
make?
that's a good way to put it together. I mean, there's a lot of things that I already enjoyed, and then just the formative experiences of my life kind of tilted me in that direction. And I've thought, now that I'm in my career and have met people of all sorts of careers and skill sets, could I do something else? You realize all the things that people do and think, oh, that would be interesting. But man, I love what I do. And I love taking care of people, and I love surgery, and I love how it's different every day. But there are certain things that are at least somewhat predictable or make sense. I love the patients. I love taking care of people and seeing how they get better. I picked the right thing. Like, I would be happy doing other things, but not as happy as I am right now.
Honestly, the only other thing that came to my mind that you might be, not, I don't know, happy, but you'd probably be really good at is a man of the cloth.
I thought about that too.
You seem someone that is very easy to open up with. You're very soft-spoken, kind and gentle. All the attributes that you want a physician to have. Almost always, you want the priest or a father or an imam or a rabbi, whatever man of the cloth you are, to have also. And kind of, I don't know, for some reason that was the only thing I was like, you'd probably be a really good priest.
Well, thank you. I thought
not to offend in any way.
No, not at all. I mean, I thought about that too. I love learning. I love reading and going through books and ideas, and so philosophy was interesting and all that. And my faith's a big part of my life. And then I really just like leading a team too, and taking a problem and tackling it. And so you can do that in a lot of things. You can do that in business. You can do that, running a church. You can do that in the OR.
Yeah. And you touched upon it, and you said you used to you loved science and math, and how did that kind of come about? Was it just naturally as a kid you were always interested in it, or was it something that a parent introduced you to, kind of like,
My dad used to always order National Geographic.
Okay.
And so we'd always get those magazines shipped in, so I always loved to read through those as a kid. And we'd have, all the old editions, and so that was fun. My grandpa also had encyclopedias, and like nobody has those anymore because we have Wikipedia. But when I wanted to know something, like I would just go through the encyclopedia and read things and learn about things. So I had resources for learning. And I remember one of my favorite things, like going on vacation, was they'd have cable and you'd have Discovery Channel, and I could watch Shark Week and see all the fun things that were on there. So I mean, I loved the thrill of discovery and adventure, and to me, like, science offered that. There's something new to be found and figured out.
The paths to unlock that exist there, but you don't know about them necessarily.
How does it work?
And was there any thought of something other than medicine when, like, before you saw cardiology surgery at 10? Were you thinking like maybe an engineer or maybe something to that extent, maybe agricultural sciences? Because there's a huge industry in there that a lot of people just don't know about. That agriculture isn't just being a farmer. There's a ton of work that's involved, and a lot of it is science and engineering behind it. Was there any thoughts like that? But was it always kind of like medicine leaning for you?
I know the first thing I ever wanted to be was a dad.
Okay. How interesting.
But then my dad was like, well, you have to have a job to be a good dad, so you got to pick something else too. And I'm sure I thought, just like every other little Texan boy, I want to be a cowboy. Everybody wants to do that and go work with the horses and hang out with the cows and shoot things. That's what every Texan thinks that you should be doing anyway. So,
and you should be doing
right.
that.
But you can do that as a hobby.
Yeah, right.
So,
which we still haven't gone hunting together. We got to figure that out one of these days.
We need to. But that I thought about that for a while, and then you realize there's other skills that are out there, and so I decided on that. And I stuck with it. I mean, it wasn't until college that I thought, well, maybe not cardiothoracics, maybe orthopedics or something else. There's other things I could do.
So in college, you actually kind of got exposed a little bit to different areas of medicine. And
yeah,
is that what started orthopedics, or was it something else unrelated to school that was a trigger point? Again, kind of like the cardiac episode that we keep going back to.
I think most men that enter into medical school think they want to do orthopedic surgery. Almost everybody says that that's what they want to do.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's.
I had no idea about that.
It's kind of the default, and it's working with athletes. It's hammers, nails, tools. It's a lot of those sort of things, and I think most guys probably think that, and then sometimes you get some exposure and go, this is really not for me. And I had rotated through other different surgical specialties and shouted in the ER and seen these things throughout college. And I thought, the ortho guys just seemed like my kind of guy. Like, you could hang out with them. It was easy. Other doctors sometimes feel like nerds. It's hard to talk with them about sports or just normal conversation. But the ortho guys seemed like I just fit right in. And then I also did like the science of it. It's mechanical. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I liked the surgeries too. You can actually see what you're doing. You use a bunch of tools. You fix bad problems, and patients are motivated, which has been fun for me because people want to get back to the level of function they had before. So I thought orthopedics is probably what I want to do, but I felt a little disingenuous because I hadn't torn my ACL. I hadn't really broken anything terribly other than just needing a cast or here and there as a kid. So I really needed that exposure. And once I got into medical school, I was able to get that.
And that kind of just, you were full all in at that point.
Oh, yeah. Some of the advice that's given to medical students when you're trying to pick your specialty, it's hard. There's so many things that you're interested in typically. And they will say you should ask your spouse what you should do after you rotate through several rotations, because they will tell you. They know before you do what you're going to pick. And so I asked.
So did Joy know?
Oh, yeah. I asked Joy because I was trying to pick, I was thinking about maybe emergency medicine. I was thinking about ENT and orthopedics. And I was pretty sure I wanted to do ortho, but these other things were interesting too. And she said, well, what? I said, what do you think? What is my specialty? And she said, well, it's clearly ortho. I said, well, why do you say that? And she said, well, the first night you were there till like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and you came home and you could not stop talking about how cool it was and all the things you learned and what y'all are going to be doing tomorrow and then Wednesday. And so you've been all about this. You were excited. Like, I couldn't believe how early you were waking up and the things that you were studying, and you couldn't put the books down because you were excited to learn these things.
Interesting. So I guess there's a lot of reasoning behind them telling you that your spouse will let you know before you know.
Yes, that's probably true.
I think it might come from someone that is heavily invested in your future, your spouse, obviously, but also has a third-party perspective because they're disconnected from what's rattling off in your head going like, but this was supposed to be the right thing for us, and this was the plan originally, and da-da-da, and all that stuff that kind of skews your actual reality from what it should be. It's a good barometer of if you made a right choice in a spouse first.
Yes. Yeah, that's the first thing you gotta get right.
And the second thing is, them being able to tell you, hey, this is actually going to give you happiness in your career versus longevity. Because unfortunately, I've met enough doctors that I feel like not all of them are in it for what you're in it. Because like you're elated when you talked about how happy you are with your career and how much joy it brings you to actually go into surgery and help people and all that stuff. And you're not saying, oh, I'm exhausted and all this stuff. Whereas I meet a lot of doctors that it almost feels like they were forced into this life and it was not meant for them genuinely. And now it's kind of like 20 years into a career and you're a doctor, but you kind of hate life.
I mean, I've worked with a lot of those people. I worked
I
with
bet,
them in medical school and you could kind of tell who those people were. And they were really smart, and they were high achieving, and they always had been. And you could tell that their parents were kind of making them do it. Your job can't be your identity. That can't be who you are and everything that you are. So it's okay to not love your job, whatever it is. It's okay for maybe your interests outside of that to be the thing that is the most important thing in your life and what defines you.
Sure.
Because if your job is a skill, I mean, heck, I could lose a hand on the way home, and if my job is my identity, well, I'm going to be depressed for the rest of my life. But you still have to have a passion for what you do, I think, for it to be something that you go through to get through residency, to get through fellowship, and just to get through every day as being a doctor. You got to love it. And I think making your kid do it because, well, that's what success is being a doctor. There's a lot of better ways to make more money with not near as much time invested.
Yeah, I think if all you're after is the prestige of the title and making money, don't go to medical school.
Right. Do something else.
You can do a ton of other stuff that would give you that type of fulfillment. If that's all you're running after, I guess. If that's what you're chasing is the title and the money, I don't know, you can be a lawyer. Did they have a title? And they make tons of money in a lot of cases,
And a lot of them are miserable, too, for the same
reason. Yeah.
Because they were told as well, hey, you got to do this. Which
is a sad reality. I think, I came up in that generation. I think you did, too. I don't know how you feel now, but I feel like I've shifted away from that forcing your kids into a career type of a life. and more of gentle persuasions of knowing what they are into and kind of like channeling those and put them into the right, but ultimately allowing them to make the choice of what they want to do.
It's got to make sense. It's got to make sense financially. You know, where's your goal? What are you going to make with that? How much is the degree going to cost? But it also has to make sense for them and their skill set.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you can't just go and become an accountant and be miserable for the rest of your life because
It pays well.
Yeah, because it pays well, but you could have done that with a ton of other stuff.
Right.
Now, should you be getting a liberal arts degree? Probably not, because that's a useless degree. But I look at a business degree as the same useless degree nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting your liberal arts degree because you're using some of the language skills developed in that because you're going to be a lawyer and the court briefs and being able to understand arguments, like there's some ways to maybe justify it if that's really your plan.
No, none whatsoever. And I'll tell you why. Becoming an attorney requires a bachelor's degree in literally anything.
Oh, yeah. So
anything whatsoever. So you could be smart about it, and instead of doing liberal arts, getting an English degree or a history degree would set you up way better to be an attorney than liberal arts
English
would.
was in liberal arts.
It may be within the housing, but liberal arts itself is a degree that you can actually get.
Oh, I just meant the category.
Oh, no. Yeah. Okay. Now I understand what you're talking about. No. I mean like
itself.
actual liberal arts degree holders, like people that have a Bachelor of Arts in liberal arts. And I'm just like, pointless in pointless.
Well, forgive me for not knowing all of the...
It's not your...
The sciences I could tell you all about, but yeah.
What do you mean? You don't know all the disciplines of school? Every single one of them? No, obviously.
I did actually minor in history because I loved it. But I needed something to distract me from all the science at one point in college. I wanted to think a little differently rather than the concrete and the memorizing facts, and so that was fun. I really enjoyed that, and that's when I thought, if you majored in history, that might help in a law career.
It definitely does in a law career, because I think one of the things that history, especially in a major, teaches you is how to go through all of the information and actually get to the facts and get to the important things and what is going to be needed for an exam or a paper and all that stuff. And a lot of being a lawyer is, like you said, writing a brief or appearing in court. Most of that is related to how well you know your case and how you can kind of like weed through it to use it to your advantage. History's kind of in that similar sense of like, you got to figure out what the truth is because it's other people that have written it, and a lot of times it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And a good history professor will want you to weed that out in part of your paper, just not to regurgitate the information. So yeah, all that makes sense to me. But I mean, if you really want to be a great attorney and you want to specify in something, like I know attorneys that have degrees in biology because they do medicine, like they do medical cases on a never-ending basis. That's the law that they practice. Or guys that have engineering degrees and are patent attorneys.
Or
there's very few of those, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a lot of guys that I know that were engineers and then went to law school because they work in the oil field and they do oil law.
Interesting. I don't know much about that, but like they're litigating in the oil industry kind of for.
Yeah, and they can be doing contracts and patents and all these sort of things.
Sure.
But oil companies themselves have cadres of lawyers.
I bet they do. Work, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they're getting sued a lot all the time, or are suing, or are trying to protect their IP.
Yeah, or fighting over property rights, or mineral rights and all those kind of things. That they're making sure that their contracts when they're buying land or getting the oil rights, that it's all makes sense.
And then it becomes very not surprising that Lubbock has these really nice fancy restaurants and hotels, because you're like, oh yeah, really expensive dudes come through here all the time.
Right.
It's one of those things where you're just like, okay, that makes more sense to me now.
Yeah.
It's funny that like the things that you don't know until you live in different parts of this country that you kind of learn about. Texas is one of those things. It's like, until you live here, you don't know shit about Texas. I'm sorry. That's just one of the honest truths about Texas is you don't know anything about this state until you actually live here.
Yeah, and when you drive across it, you just realize how different it is in each piece. And each piece kind of has their own personality.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched the movie Bernie?
Bernie? No.
So it's with Jack Black and Matthew McConaughey. It was probably made in like 2005 or something like that. But it's a true story.
Is it good?
It's good. It's a kind of eclectic comedy.
Okay.
But there's a 1 minute clip at the beginning where there's this this old guy talking about Texas, and he just goes through Texas geography, and it is perfect and it is hilarious. So I don't even think that guy's an actor. I think they were just interviewing a townsfolk person, and he just kind of started talking about Texas and how it's broken up. And I think a lot of the people that they used in that movie were actually townspeople that lived there. They tried to get actors, and the people that lived there just did a better job.
Sometimes it works out that way.
Yeah, it's a great picture of a small town Texas, and Matthew McConaughey grew up in small town Texas, so he knows.
Right.
He actually grew up where all my relatives did.
So closer to San Antonio?
Yeah, in a city called Uvalde.
I know. Okay.
Yeah,
we've all heard Uvalde lately.
Which no one knew where Uvalde was or anything until recently.
Yeah, unfortunately for the wrong reason.
Yes.
We all know about Uvalde, but that again is the sad state of the United States.
Yep.
It's fucking unfortunate, but nothing we can do about it, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe raising better men would be a good idea. A
Yeah.
good place to start.
That's a good place.
I don't see it as a societal issue, nor do I see it as a systemic issue. I see it as a parental issue. First and foremost, you're a dad. I'm a dad. We both know that, like, there's guns in my house. There's guns in your house. Are they secure? Yeah. There's a reason for that. Are my kids exposed to them? Yeah, but in a very safe manner, in a very different manner, in a manner that I get to see how they interact with the weapon and kind of make mental notes of, am I okay with one of my kids having a gun, and am I not okay with the other one having a gun, and do I have specific reasons? That should be telltale signs that most parents will feel. In my opinion, I could be completely wrong about this, but my opinion is that active parents delineate a lot of these stupid things from happening.
Yeah,
And
I think so too. And knowing your kid and being close with your kid, I think your kids need to be your priority. That needs to be your number one job. You're raising the next generation, and you need to make sure you're doing a good job of that.
Yeah, we kind of eroded that whole system by, and God, I'm going to get so much hate for this, but I don't care, by asking women to go into the workforce equally as men. That should have never happened. Nothing against women, but function of raising the next generation has always been a woman's duty. They're right. They're better at it than men, in my opinion. And we should have never ruined that. And I feel like you may be one of these people that kind of agrees with this to a certain degree, because I don't think your wife works. She raises the kids, right? And she has a degree. She's well educated, the whole gambit, but she's taking care of your kids and raising them right now.
Yeah, I think it depends on your family structure and what's going on. She was my sugar mama for a while I was in medical school, putting us through, and then we didn't have kids, and then now I get to return the favor, thankfully. And when we were in residency, she had to work, so just that was tough.
But that seems like sacrifices that both sides made,
right,
with the ultimate goal of being this situation. It wasn't that you were laying on a couch going like, well, I'll be a famous something one day.
Right.
No, you were like, I've been medical school and now I'm doing a residency, and I understand it sucks, but hey, in a few years it turns 180 and then I get to be the breadwinner and I get to provide for you. But I'm pretty sure that also gave you a much stronger relationship with your wife.
Oh, absolutely.
A level of respect and love for one another that is unparalleled, because you've gone through some hard times.
And I could not have done it without her. And these were all conversations that we had before we even got married, that this is the plan. Are you okay with the plan? Is your career aspirations such that you would want us to have a nanny or go and get a master's degree and then not take care of the kids? Like, what do you want? And I think it's critical that you decide on that beforehand and you have the same vision. And you've been married just like me. You realize that you change and your wife changes as you grow together and grow older, and hopefully you grow together and not apart. And I think it's purposeful to do that. But yeah, I mean, the way that our family works out, she is a stay-at-home mom and she takes care of the kids and they love her. And I work because I have to be out. I can't work from home. It's kind of hard to do surgery from the house.
For now.
Yeah, for now. It's true. maybe later. But for us, it works. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in traditional roles. And it's got to be something that you and your spouse agree with and figure out. But we've flip-flopped who's in charge of paying for things. And I think there's a lot of things about traditional gender roles that sometimes you have to realize what is each person better at. Like, I know for my parents' marriage, it was tough because my dad felt like, well, the guy's supposed to handle the finances, and my mom's just pure better with numbers. So once they realized, hey, let mom actually handle the bouncing of the checkbook because she's better at it than you are because she's just better at math, I think that solves a lot of things for them.
Oh, yeah. No, my wife and I had the same exact crossroads.
Yeah.
Even though business and blah, blah, blah. And I'm so bad at math, it's not even a joke.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just horrible at it. And she literally has a degree in accounting. And her mom is a math professor. So, like, she's got a genetic predisposition to being better at numbers than I am. So
I remember waking up.
I leave it alone. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not screwing with this anymore.
I woke up in a cold sweat one night, like, probably 4 months into, like, a tough part of residency. I was like, we haven't paid the mortgage. And she's like, Adam, I've been paying the mortgage for 3 months. Go back to sleep. Don't worry. I got it. I was like, oh, thank goodness. I thought we were getting kicked out of our house next week.
Which is like, that's the thing, is she is so smart that she understood that there is a much larger goal and objective here, and there's a dream. Because the truth of the matter is, you can become a doctor, but not everybody's going to become a surgeon or an oncologist or specialize in something that is, it takes a lot more time to actually get to that point. And then from there, you're still nobody. You still got to build an entire career where you become a respected orthopedic surgeon, right?
Right.
Like, there's this whole thing of
and run a business, and
exactly.
make it make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because like now you're like, hey, cool, I'm part of this orthopedic group, but I'm the new guy. I don't know anybody. Nobody knows me, and I got to prove myself. So like the dream never actually stops. It's like this never-ending continuum of getting to the next part. And I'm sure like 20 years from now, when you're, in your 50s and maybe a professor somewhere, you're like, okay, cool, now I've made it. But that is a very long journey, and I feel like Joy was very smart about knowing that if I handle some of this stuff for him, he'll be able to, in the long term, handle everything.
Yeah.
And kind of give us the life that we seek.
You have to learn to enjoy the little moments along the way and realize that if you were waiting to clear that next hurdle for your happiness to start, and to find joy in situations that you're going to be continually disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of burnout comes in for physicians, because they keep waiting for that next step to bring them the happiness or the joy or the paycheck or whatever else. And I think I had to be disappointed a couple times before I realized, oh, wait, calm down. And the thing that taught me the most valuable lessons was having children. Because as you see them and you see them grow and leave a stage that they're never going to be in again, and you realize that time was fleeting, and if you try and wish past it, it's gone. Even the hard stages, having two 2-year-olds right now, they're moody at times, and they stick their hand in their diapers and get poop all over the walls or whatever. Like, they do 2-year-old things, but they also run and jump in your lap and snuggle with you, and they're these cute little kids that they'll never be again. And so you realize how fleeting some of those moments are, and you really cherish them more.
So best lessons from the kids.
I think so, for me anyway.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, life has taught me a lot of things. Near-death experiences have been good learning lessons. But outside of that, watching my 3 kids growing up, and especially with my 3-year-old now, I'm missing so much of the other 2. Because I was like, I remember when he was 3, and I remember when he was 2. And you're just like, you cherish it so much more in retrospect, because you're like, I will never, ever be able to have those moments again. Yeah. And I got to just hang on to them for as long as I can in my head, because they exist nowhere other than there. Because my kids were too young to even remember any of that stuff. Yeah. You're like, it's mine. It's my memory.
Right.
And I want to hang on to them. And
I see why parents spoil the baby,
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. We're so bad about it, too, with the 3-year-old now. I'm sure you guys do
None
with
of the
the
other
2-year-olds.
kids, could sleep in our bed or anything. Like, we were very strict about that. I'm like, no. It's mostly just because, I had to sleep. I got surgery tomorrow or something. But,
right.
Now, James and June are in the same room, and June will wake up crying, and James just runs and hops in our bed. And he literally just gets in bed, puts his hands behind his head, and falls asleep. Just like that.
Couldn't care less,
doesn't
right?
move, so we're like, oh, Well, he could stay, I guess.
I think part of it is us wanting to kind of just relive those, because you've got two older ones,
Yeah.
and you want to just relive those little moments.
Yep.
The same way I want to relive those little moments with my, I remember having those moments, and you're like, I want them again.
Yeah.
I want those hugs, and because my 9-year-old couldn't care less about, jumping in your lap and hanging out, and it's a completely different dynamic now. It's more of he's getting older and wants to do things that are interesting to him, and you're just kind of like part of his life now. Whereas before, it was all about you giving them love, but it was mainly you receiving it on your end. Because, again, they're too young to understand most of it. It was just mainly for you to have these memories.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with you. Kids teach you so much.
But I think realizing that made me, better at everything. A better surgeon, a better husband, just a better person, because it's so much about being a parent teaches you that life is not about you.
It's a big motivator, right?
Yeah, and that was when I realized, like, my identity is not just in what I do. And it always had been. It was always like, hey, I'm going to be the top of my class. I'm going to get the best grades. I'm going to go to the medical school I want to. I'm going to be the top of the class there, and then I'm going to go to orthopedics. I'm going to crush it. Like, it was all about, me and my goals. And it's good. I need those things. You need to have drive. But, like, if I had a bad day at work, it was possibly the worst day of my life, if something bad happened at work, which I was, 20-something years old and had breezed through everything. So, of course, but when you realize, like, hey, there's more to it than just that, you're raising this whole other person, and this is the only time you get with them. Like that, it really makes you slow down and not try and, like, speed up to being done with residency, being done with fellowship, like finally not being poor anymore. Like you realize, hey,
poor is a big motivating factor.
Yeah,
also.
yeah. You're like, I can be poor because I know this is temporary. But what's also temporary is holding this little girl. And she's gonna grow up.
And I understand people. Poor is a relative term, depending on So a lot of people would sit there going like, "Well, lucky you got to go to medical school and all this." But like, people don't understand. Poor is poor.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's poor, I can't afford to pay rent, or if it's poor, I can't pay anything other than just rent and survive for the next year or two because I'm doing residency. And residents get paid, but they get paid shit. Like, 30, 40 grand a year if you're lucky?
It was about 50 grand a year.
Okay. And then they tax you on all of that.
Oh, yeah. And then you still got student loans that are accruing interest immediately. And
yeah, that's the fun part.
Right.
That's the other thing I don't understand. How come physicians don't get like, hey, if you're a doctor for like 10 years in a hospital, you should be getting like a waiver for all your student loans or something?
Yeah, they tried to do that, and then that program's going away.
Of course.
Because it's just like most things with the government, they promise you something, and then by the time it gets there, they go, we don't actually have the money for that.
Which is, I don't believe it.
We have money for Ukraine, but not for you guys.
We have money for everything. That's the other thing is like, we never actually run out of money. They're just like, oh, we'll print more, and then there's,
Inflation.
Yeah. Or we'll tax more, or this or that. And you're just sitting there going like, curious question, the X amount of dollars that you already do collect on a yearly basis, where the hell is all that going? Like, do we really need to spend all of that on the most random ass shit?
Yeah, that's why I think everyone should pay taxes. It's because if everybody pays taxes, then you really care about where it goes.
Yeah.
And we should be able to get an itemized receipt of where all that money went.
Now, they're quick to ask you where your money went, but they never want to tell you where their money is going after they've taken it from you.
Right.
Which, again, like you just mentioned it, I don't understand why we have to fund this stupid war that has nothing to do with us, genuinely. Neither side is a side that we represent.
Yeah.
Neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians. They're just two people that are in a conflict. And I get the feeling if we stopped paying for that conflict, it would end really quickly. Because both sides would kind of be like, hey, I've got the upper hand. You're screwed completely. You want to talk about it yet?
Yeah, or why doesn't their neighbors pay for it? Well, why doesn't Europe pay for it? Why do we have to pay for it?
Come on, Adam.
We don't live over there.
Stop saying these things that you shouldn't be saying out loud.
Stop asking good questions.
Yeah, just stop being logical, for God's sake.
Or why don't we fix what's going on here and before we start spending billions other places.
You mean all the small little problems that could have been completely solved with what we sent to Ukraine already?
Yeah, yeah. Those are the things I think about. People running into bridges, we could fix those.
Yeah. That would be a simple one to fix.
Yeah.
We could probably get rid of the entire homelessness problem.
Yeah, there's that.
Completely.
And it's not to say that we don't have compassion for things going on internationally, but I just how we pick and choose things makes no sense to me.
No, I get it. To have compassion, I have, sympathy and empathy for people going through a hard time.
But this is not aid.
But this
in
is
a way of like providing food for a famine. This is providing jets and bombs and
yeah. I mean, what we're providing is
fighting somebody that we're not in a fight with.
Totality is killing others. That's all you're funding is you're killing people. You have no idea why you're killing these people, by the way. The American public should know this. Like, tell me a good reason why the Russians are your enemy, and I'll actually listen to you. But you can't come up with one.
It sounds like most of these Russians don't want to fight either.
No, because in actuality, we fought alongside each other in 2 major world wars. You mean we're allies with the people that were sending the bombs to kill? What the fuck are you guys talking about? What did they ever do to each other? I still can't get a rational answer from anyone. But they're like, no, they hate our way of life. I'm like, they don't actually. If you talk to the Russian people, they kind of like your way of life. It's fun. There's good food involved, good music, good culture. If you go to Russia, people in Russia a lot of times dress like the Europeans or the Americans. They're listening to American music. They don't hate, and like they're Christian people for the most part too. Like we forget that. You're like, wait, we're so much more similar. Like take a hillbilly from Texas and a hillbilly from Russia, put them in a room together with a bottle of anything that has 40% alcohol. They'll be best friends in an hour.
I actually had a patient this week who moved from Russia in the 70s.
Wow.
And so he was just kind of telling me the story of his life, which fortunately, if somebody doesn't show up, if a patient, ghosts me and someone else is already in the office, like I just kind of ask people questions about their life, and the amount of cool stories that show up every day is unbelievable. But he was telling me just sort of his story of moving over here, coming from Russia, Soviet Russia at the time, to the United States, and being able to like start his own business and how things have gone, and then how he's like, but now you guys have kind of ruined it, and that reminds me of home where I came from. All the rules, all the red tape, all the government interference. He's like, I feel bad for our country now.
Interesting. And what did he move to Texas originally, like in the 70s? Did he come to Texas?
Mm-hmm.
And he was much happier back then than he is now with the way the country is going.
That's kind of what he was saying.
Interesting. I wonder, did he specify what was kind of like,
no, I kind of focused
him
back on his knee at that point.
But okay.
But, he was just telling me, and I'm always impressed by people, like you, that speak different languages, because here, English and maybe a little Spanish if you're lucky, but he was talking about all the different languages he learned and how when he goes over to Europe, how he loves to just speak all these different languages that he learned as a kid. He'll go and he'll speak German, he speaks French. He said he also speaks Arabic.
Wow.
And Russian. And he said, and then he showed up here and didn't know any English. And so he said, I kind of just learned just like anybody else does by picking up the slang and watching TV. And, and there you go. There was no Rosetta Stone in 1977.
And even if there is, I don't know how many people actually use the Rosetta Stone now, or they do exactly what your guy just said, was watch TV, listen to the music, kind of like put yourself in the society, and you slowly pick it up. Plus, English, and people keep saying it's a very difficult language, but I disagree with them completely on this. I'm like, English is very easy to pick up and speak. Maybe the writing part of it may be more difficult to be a proficient writer in English and all of the complexity, but to be able to do conversational English, pretty simple. If you take a little bit of time, a couple of years into it, you be able to go to a bank and grocery store and get away with kind of like doing stuff. But a lot of other languages are just so much more difficult in the way that they're structured, because they have, male is addressed specifically and females are specifically addressed, and kids and elderly, and like French is one of those languages. It's like, it's a Latin-based language, but it's very, very complicated because the way you say a word, in context to a sentence means something completely different, even though it's the same exact word. And like English doesn't really do a lot of that. It's just like it's very straightforward. Red is red.
I always
You
think
know.
about the tonal languages too, like Chinese, and I think a lot of Eastern languages are that
Yeah.
way. Which, if you, if you don't develop that ear as a kid, I
It
just
seems
don't
very
think-
difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not
I'd-
going to be very good at that.
I don't know how well I'd be able to pick up like Cantonese or
Unless you have some sort of musical ability, maybe.
maybe yeah that probably makes a lot of sense. Or if you already speak multiple languages
Yeah.
that are not similarly based, like Latin language is a Baltic language, Arabic languages, and all of these that are just like very different from each other. That might make it a little bit easier. Like your patient who speaks Russian probably speaks other languages because he picked up 2 or 3 as a kid, and it just kind of made it easier to connect the dots with other languages later on,
Yeah.
which we don't have that here.
No,
Like-
and that's something that we kind of bask in our ignorance, and it's shameful. I think that we're like, oh, we're Americans, we only speak English, and we only have to speak English. And I mean, it's something that you're like stupidly proud of, and it's really dumb. Like, we should actually, just for our own benefit, learn how to speak other things. One, because it I think changes the neuroplasticity of your brain and
I was
makes
just-
you better at learning other skills too.
I was actually just going to ask you, as the physician, that I've read that there's a lot of research that shows that kids that play a musical instrument or kids that speak multiple languages have a completely different pathway of thinking than just a linear one language, no musical interest whatsoever. Because music is a language. People don't know that, but like music is its own language. The notes, the way it's written, all of that has structure to it, just the same way English does. And I think there's a lot of truth to the like kids that are exposed to music or multiple languages from a young age tend to do better in life, are smarter, are well adjusted more, because they just have different ways of seeing things. It's a perspective thing.
Think of it like sports, like agility, strength training, sport-specific exercises. You're training all different parts of your body, and your brain is that way too. And I'm not up on all of the recent data with dementia and those sort of things, but
Right.
What I do know is that brain stimulation is good, and not just like a crossword puzzle. But when you're 60 or 70, if you haven't learned an instrument, start now. And it's going to be harder, but that might be protective for dementia or other things because you're learning new skills and you're actually working out your brain. If it's not hard, then you're not doing it right.
I think that might be like the overwhelming theme to human life is that you always have to be doing difficult tasks. Doesn't matter what age you're at. Because think about it like from birth. As a baby, the first 3 years are just filled with difficulties.
Falling and
You got to
sickness
crawl, and then you got to try to figure out how to stand and just hold balance. And then first couple of steps, and then speaking comes into play. Potty training. All of these things are very difficult things if you have never, ever done them before. Ever. Like, people don't, we don't get it. Like, when you're born and the first thing you open your eyes, it hurts because your eyes have never used.
Oh, yeah.
They've never had light. These things have never functioned before. Ears have never functioned before. Senses are overwhelmed. That's probably the reason kids are born crying, is because there's like an overwhelming sensation of pure pain in the first instance of life.
They utterly fail at everything all the time. Like, imagine how frustrated you would be if you just want to walk or you just want the goldfish from the pantry and your parent will not give it to you, even though you have asked for it appropriately.
Right.
They don't understand. Well, I'm making dinner. Like, you're not going to give me goldfish right now. Like, they're like, I did it all right. I'm going to melt in a puddle and scream.
Yeah. Well,
This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me,
And again, it's so relative. It's like the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. You can't compare it to anybody else. So for a 2-year-old, goldfish crackers, not getting them, life has ended completely. This is total annihilation of their worldview.
Yep.
But because they're 2.
So I got James a little bike this weekend, and he's been doing the Strider bike. He crushes that thing. So I thought maybe we'll get him a pedal bike and just see if he can do it. And I was going to take the training wheels off because I think it might be a little easier for him because he's used to the Strider bike. But
Oh, what's a Strider bike? Is that kind of like just
it has no pedals at all.
Use your feet to push off?
Use your feet to
okay,
go.
I know what
and
you're talking about.
He is so good at it, and he's gotten better at it. I mean, I think there are inherent differences between men and women. It's obvious. Physically, he is more gifted than any child we've ever had. My daughter, at the same age, they speak and are more articulate, and I think are more sensitive to people and what is happening from an emotional standpoint than the boy is, and that's just how it is. But he can bike like crazy. So I thought we're gonna get him this bicycle that actually has wheels and it's got the pedals and training wheels. And so I hadn't taken the training wheels off yet, and he could not figure out like how to get the pedal to go. And he was so mad. He was just so mad. And then like his sister would try and show it, and he did not want any help. He wants to figure it out. But I mean, he was so excited to get this bike, and then when he couldn't figure it out, it was just crushing to him.
Because for us, it's such a rudimentary mechanical thing. One up, one down, one up, one down, push, pull, kind of like very simple mechanic. But if you've never dealt with that before, it becomes impossible.
Well, and not
because your feet are so used to like just pushing your feet, it's easier, right? There's no other mechanism there other than ground and you.
And if you go the wrong direction, instead of going forward, if you go backwards, you stop.
Yeah, that's right. They all have the back brake.
Which I hate. I hate the back brake for the kids' bikes. It should just be like a back handle or something, because it's, I guess you learn very quickly what's the right direction. But if they try and stand up or put any force in and it goes the wrong way, if it's right at the apex, and they brake instead. And that was his problem, was he would go and get a revolution, and then he would push and it would go backwards and he would just stop.
Okay, I know. We dealt with the exact same thing with my eldest when he first got a bike, and it would annoy him.
Right. Well, Joy was like, just take the training wheels off, let him use it as a Strider bike, and then once he's going and he puts his feet on the pedals, then we'll figure it out. Which is true. He'll also fall, and I did not have time to watch him because I was the only adult in the home over the weekend. So I was like, I don't have time to let him go in the alley and experiment right now.
Was Joy out of town or something?
Yeah, she had a girls' weekend, which much deserved for her. And so her and all of her college roommates were hanging out.
Yeah, it's not easy raising 4 kids.
Oh, yeah.
It's a massive amount of work, and it never ends. And anytime I'd ever see Joy, she'd always have a smile on her face, and I was like, I don't know how you do it, but good on you, lady. You're doing it better than I.
She's resilient. That's kind of who she is for sure. But it was a fun weekend. We had a good time. We took everybody to Shields.
Oh, I love Shields so much.
Including the new puppy, which was the girls' idea.
How's the puppy doing, by the way? We talked about this, not on camera, but we just had a conversation. Like, hey, I got a dog, by the way.
He's doing good. He mostly pees in the right spot.
Okay.
Which is helpful. And he has all sorts of puppy energy like you would expect, but he is challenged by 4 children who wear him out.
That's a good thing, I guess.
I mean, I know Golden's had a lot of energy, which he does, but he likes to take naps and will every once in a while just say, I need a break from everybody and go lay down. It's great.
Is he 6 months now? Or is he over that?
I think he's 5 months, but he's tripled in size since we got him. I mean, he was like 11 pounds when we brought him home, and he's like
30 probably now?
35, yeah.
So he's going to get up to what, like 60? Is that what their max weight is?
His dad was like 80.
So he's a big boy.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a ton of hair that comes with that weight, right? Like a lot of it's just like hair growth at some point.
He's fluffy and, but big. Since he's an English cream golden retriever, he's kind of got stockier look to him. So his bones are wider, and so there's probably some bone and muscle mass in there too.
All right. And he's more of is he protective at all? Has that kicked in?
Not really. He's pretty friendly.
Goldens aren't really known for their like protective instinct. They're not like German Shepherds or something.
Right. Doesn't really seem to be the best guard dog. But he's curious and just kind of happy to see anybody that walks in. So I'm sure if someone was robbing the house, he would just say like, "Oh, what do you want to see?"
Let me take you around,
exactly.
Show you the house.
So it's been a lot of fun. It was probably about a year or two too early, just from having twins were about to potty train too. But
so now you've got 3 potty trainers.
Exactly, yeah. Although we didn't want to wait for it to be more convenient for us because the older girls, they really wanted a dog. And I felt like, okay, I can kind of handle, and the dog's more or less like my project, so I can handle that and keep joy out of it as much as she can while she's taking care of the kids. But I thought that was something that the girls would really enjoy, and they have really risen to the occasion, and picked up the chores and scooping the poop and giving them brushes and taking them on walks. Like, they've done a really good job. So
Well,
I
that's
think
great.
being able to trust your kids with some responsibility here and there is, I think, helpful.
I think it's imperative. Like, we do a lot for our kids. I'm sure you guys do a lot for your kids. Tend to their needs to the nth degree. But at a certain age, you got to start putting in difficulty and tasks. And you're like, well, you got to do all this stuff too. And restrictions, I think, are a very important part of a healthy child's development. Of hearing no is so important. Now, not always, but they have to learn, like, oh, you want to go play? Well, no, you need to clean up after the dog first, then feed the dog, and then you can go play. Or in between somewhere, make sure you wash your hands at least 2 times.
Sure,
You know what I mean? Like, because I don't feel like you're going to be doing any of this in a hygienic way.
And I think the why is important too. I mean, our girls this week, they're supposed to pick up the poop as soon as they come home from school. Well, they didn't. They started playing and doing homework, and then one of the twins stepped through dog poop and tracked it in through the house. And
There you go.
so we're like, this is why we have the rules. This is why the structure for your afternoon is the way it is. Because if y'all pick up everything, then y'all can play in the backyard and nobody's worried about anything. So that was a low-risk mistake, right? So we can clean up the mess. It's no big deal. And then they've learned, okay, mom and dad have reasons why they say what they say, and now maybe next time they'll listen a little better.
And if it's reasonable, it makes sense to them. Like, in our house, the rule is no sweets during the school week. So, like, Friday through Sunday, knock yourself out. No restrictions. Have fun. Do whatever you want. Eat whatever you want. Monday through Friday until you get home from school, no sugar. You want something sweet, you can have fruit. And that why question came up inevitably. Like, how come all of my friends get to take Oreos as snacks for school and I don't? And I was like, all right, I'm going to come pick you up next time from school, and I want to see these Oreo eating friends. And you see them, and you're like, see the difference between you and them? And at first, they don't pick up on it. And I'm like, you're not as big as they are. And that's a good thing. Even though you may not understand it now, I'm like, these healthy habits, when you become an adult, will translate into your adulthood. It'll be something so you're so used to not doing that it'll be a good habit to pick up. And you kind of explain it to them multiple times because, they're kids and they're like, I still want the damn Oreos.
Right.
Even though I'm going to be healthy when I'm 25, what does it mean to me now?
Right.
But when they are also in sports, then they really do understand the benefit of it. I'm like, see how you're outpacing everybody at this point? Because I'm like, you're putting healthy fuel in and you're burning healthy fuel in your water polo class or your fencing class or football, whatever your sport of the month is. Because those change all the time, too.
Sure.
Do you guys go through that headache of, like, trying stuff out until they find what they like?
Yeah, we've done it more with Avery than with Addison. We'll probably do more with her next year. But she's on a couple different teams that just at different times of the year, like she'll do soccer or basketball or gymnastics or I don't know if we've gotten into swimming all that much or tumbling, dance. We've done it all.
We all parents who care about getting their kids into like healthy habits will do the gambit of sports.
Yeah.
Until they find the one that the kid is semi okay with, and they'll be like, all right, we're all in on this. At least you're moving.
Yeah. Well, Avery, my basketball is probably my favorite, just because I played that, that in baseball growing up. But she's pretty good at basketball.
Okay.
So that's been fun to watch, and she's probably more aggressive than everybody else on the court. She's not the most coordinated, but she has the most heart, I think, and I can appreciate that. And I don't really care how good she is. I just want her to have a good time, but also like really try hard. And so she's done that in basketball, and it's been fun to watch her grow over the years because she's been doing it with the same group of girls, and they're all growing and getting better and becoming more coordinated and being able to shoot from further and actually like pass the ball to each other consistently rather than just like a horde of kids moving all around in a circle. So that's been fun.
That I think that's the most important part. Is you said it very plainly and smart. Your aspirations isn't for her to be some great WNBA player. Your aspiration is for her to have a healthy outlet and another way of learning. It's all about team building dynamics, hand-eye coordination, being a leader in certain instances. Like, if Avery's going to be the leader of the team, she's just going to be the leader of the team. There's no denying it. And sports is a great way of recognizing what your kid is in this world. A lot of people don't want to see that either, but not everybody's meant to be the quarterback.
And that's okay.
Yeah, because it's a team effort.
She's, maybe like ball sports, she's not like the best on the team, but I mean, she's actually a pretty good runner, which is like Joy is an excellent runner.
Okay.
We did the neighborhood 5K at Thanksgiving.
The turkey trot.
Turkey trot.
I remember you even texted me one year and you were like, "Hey man, I'm going to do the turkey trot."
Yeah.
I had no idea what that was. So I started Googling. I'm like, "What the hell is a turkey trot? I don't know what these things are."
Joy won for her age group.
Nice.
And so did Avery.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
For like 10 and under, even though she's 8.
So a 5K is what, a little over 2 miles?
So Avery ran the mile.
Okay.
But Joy did the 5K, and believe it or not, I actually got first place in the mile run for men in their 30s because every man in their 30s was running the 5K, but since I was running it with my daughter who got first place, therefore I won the.
Because you just did it quicker than everybody else?
Well, yeah, because I went with the winning girl. That's the only reason that I won.
Nice.
It's the only
Very
race
nice.
I've ever won in my entire life, and probably, unless Avery wins again next year and I'm running with her, it'll probably be the only time I win something.
Well, that's kind of fun, though, right? You father-daughter get to share this, like, we both won the 1 mile.
Exactly.
And because of you that I won the 1 mile,
100%. So that was a lot of fun. I didn't even realize that. And so, like, I was celebrating, like, Joy and Avery's medals, and then they called my name. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
Well, what did I win?
Yeah, I won the 1 mile run. Are you kidding me? And I realized, oh, yeah, all the other men were also running with their daughters or their sons.
Which makes sense,
Yeah, totally. But it was fun. So she's good at that. And then, like, art, she's incredibly gifted at. It is crazy.
This is Avery again?
Yeah, Avery. Yeah, so she's, like, interpersonal stuff and art, it's phenomenal. And I am impressed the things she does. I'm like, I can't do that. I don't even, like, she makes 3D art all the time.
Oh, shit. What is that, like, drawing 3D
Well,
and
I mean,
stuff?
she'll
Or
like
actual sculpting, things like that?
So she'll sculpt stuff. She did that this weekend. Saturday, she's like, Dad, I'm going to make you an owl. I was like, okay.
Okay, why not?
She took some construction paper, shredded a bunch of construction paper, and stuffed these papers that she had taped and glued together and, like, made a 3D owl.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of cool. I don't know how I'd do that, but anyways, she's got that 3D mindset. So I don't know what she's going to do in life, but it's going to be cool.
That's the incredible thing about when your kids do something that I can't draw to save my life.
Oh, yeah, I'm terrible at it, too.
But my eldest, he's good at drawing, and you just sit there going, like, I can't do that now. How are you able to do these things? And he's no Picasso by any stretch of the imagination, but he's just really good at it. And if he pursued it, could probably become very good at it because he's just got that natural talent that needs to be fine-tuned and kind of, like, channeled into the right way. But I sit there going, like, I can't. If I spend a lifetime, I still won't be able to draw a straight line on a piece of paper.
Does he get
just
that from
bad.
Maya, or where is his artistic
It's definitely
ability?
it comes from my grandfather, who was an artist, also an engineer and a bunch of other things. But, like, I still have paintings of his in my house, and they're some of my most cherished paintings.
Yeah.
But my father-in-law is also a painter, and I have his paintings in my home too.
No,
And
both sides.
1 and 2 are done by my father-in-law, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you've seen the paintings of the kids, the portraits, the faces.
Yeah.
That's all my father-in-law. He did all
Really?
of those. Yeah. The painting of Maya and stuff. That's all him.
That's incredible.
I think that it's channeled through Maya's side of the family.
Yeah.
Because my mom and I can't draw.
It's
And
in
Maya's
there
mom
somewhere.
can't draw either. You know,
Yeah.
math professor, very just 2+2 kind of a person, but
Yeah.
her father, very good at that. He did it professionally for a long time. He designed shoes and stuff for companies and things like that. So probably where he gets it from. So great-grandfather and grandfather side.
That's cool.
And what about your, where does Avery get it from?
So
For your dad, I'm guessing, right? Because
actually, my maternal grandma, she is an
Wow.
artist.
Okay.
And I mean, we've got stuff in our house that she's painted, and like we all love her paintings. And then Joy's side, like Joy's sister, is very artistic, and so it comes from sort of both sides.
so yeah, there's a good intersect coming
Yeah.
in from both sides of the family.
Mm.
I like seeing those things that when you read about, genetics and you look into it and you kind of like, sure, there's some like truth to it. And then you have kids and you're like, oh my God, they sleep like me. It's crazy. It's like, there's no way I could have taught them how to sleep.
yeah.
Like it's so much, you're passing all of this down, and it is programming. It's not just eye color and, a weird itch or something. There's so much that is so connected to your parents and to your wife's parents and then to you. And you're like, I see all of that in you people. And it's kind of weird.
Just wait till we have grandkids, and you get to see these things like repeated again. Is what my patients tell me. They're like, you can see those little personality traits and quirks like from your parents now, like in your grandkids. You're like,
Oh, that's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
That's going to be nuts. Just like having little versions of my mom running around or my wife's mom running around is just going to be funniest thing in the world.
Yeah.
That's going to be awesome, though. Are you excited about that prospect of becoming a grandparent one day?
So
I mean, I don't think we're anywhere near that.
No.
I think we're both at least 10 to 20 years away from that conversation.
So one of my co-residents said, like, if you're lucky, you get to experience the magic and joys of the world 3 times. Like, 1, when you're a kid and you're discovering it. 2, as a parent and you're rediscovering, like, oh, look at this bug. Like, look at this airplane. All the things that you're teaching the world about to your kid,
Okay.
And if you're lucky, you get to do it as a grandparent too. And you get to relive all the wonderful things that make this world beautiful, things that you've forgotten, that you become distracted just by life, and you get to see it all again.
That sounds so beautiful.
Yeah, and
That sounds interesting.
I'm all about that. And right now, I'm in my second go-round. But, after about 10 years, you stop noticing the bulldozers and the trains and the airplanes. And,
Right.
And then you'll get some grandkids and get to do it all over again.
Speaking of which, are you guys looking for adding more persons, or are you done with 4?
We should be done.
Yeah. We should be done?
Someone's surgery didn't work. We have another one.
But would you be wanting to?
It depends. It depends on the personality of the kid.
Right.
We've got some kids that are harder than others. And if we were adding an easier one, we'd probably be fine. We'd need another car. We'd need a Sprinter van or something. But
They don't get easier.
yeah,
Each kid that comes brings in their own level of difficulty.
right.
And then the other ones are older, they spoil them, the youngest one too. And you're completely screwed in that point. Because, like, before it was mom gets mad, you run to dad. Dad gets mad, you run to mom. Now, if both of us are mad, they'll run to the older brother. Like, at least that's what my 3-year-old does. He'll just run to the older 2 and be like, protect me, damn it. This is what you're made for. And they will literally do that. They will like, why are you getting mad at him?
Yeah.
You're like, hold on, man. There's a reason for all of this. We're not just getting mad for the sake of getting mad.
Right.
Like, look at the floor. It's covered in whatever. And
Well, I think I can't adequately love and take care of another one the way I want to. I want to be able to know them all enough and spend time with them and go to their games and do those kind of things. And I think if we had one more in the mix, it would just be too much.
I agree. I mean, we've got 3, you've got 4. And I feel like even now to add another one would be taking away from the other 3 a lot.
Yeah.
Because the difference, I guess, is because my 2 are very close in age. And then there's like a big gap between number 3. And then having another one is just going to put 2 large gaps between all 3 of them. And none of them will have shared experiences. Because I know my 2 older ones, a lot of the stuff that they'll do in the future will be very much so the same. there's only a year difference between them. It's not that hard to, you'll take both of them to Six Flags and you'll
Right.
take both of them to Disneyland. That's fine. And then when the 3-year-old gets a little bit older, he'll have his experiences and those two will just enjoy them again. But to add somebody right now is going to screw with somebody's experience somewhere
Right.
along the line. And I don't want to deal with that. Because, like, you've got twins, so they'll just do everything literally together. Even though boy and girl, they'll still do everything together. Those experiences are very easy. And then the two older ones will just be like, well, we get to re-experience a lot of cool stuff.
Right.
You
It's like we have two sets in a way.
Yeah. What's the age difference between your two older ones?
They're 3 years apart.
It's not that big.
Yeah,
It's not,
it depends on what part. Like 2.5, really.
yeah, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Really not that bad. But when you're got like 9 and 10-year-olds, and then you add a newborn into that mix,
Yeah.
it's a huge
like
disconnect.
That's a different generation almost.
It is. And like I know I've got a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old, but when you're 30 and you're 23, you're getting kind of close.
Yeah. It's a big difference.
Like you'll be all right once you're 25 and you're 32. You guys will be able to hang out again and be friends. I know there'll be a disconnect in your teenage years because it's normal. We all hated everything and everyone when we were teenagers because you hate yourself at that
That's
age too because you're like, I don't understand what I am anymore.
Yeah. What was happening to me?
Like I'm a freak of nature. I like everything and I hate everything at the same time.
And I run into all the cabinets and doors and
Yeah.
how tall I am and
and like every morning is a different experience of what your voice will sound like for
gosh,
months
yes.
on end, and you're just like, oh, I thought today was going to be a good day. I guess not. This is what the world is giving me.
Yep.
And that's all fine. We're sort of prepared for when my 3-year-old will be at an age where the other two will just hate him. I'm like, all right, that's fine. We're going to deal with this at some point.
I bet the younger and the older will team up on the middle, and it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be fun.
They've been messing with each other already.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've noticed is that never is it the two older ones joining forces against the younger one. It never happens that way. It's always older and the youngest, or middle and the youngest against the other one.
Right.
And you're like, all right, this is funny. This is hilarious to me.
It's going to be sad, I think, when one of them leaves for college and heads off. And
That's the thing that I'm so afraid of, is that I know that two of them are going to go to college 4 years before the third one goes to college, and he's going to have this whole empty nest thing going on, and like he's not going to have his older brothers there.
so that happened with us.
Did you? Yeah. So I was going to ask because you've had
Yeah.
you've got 4 in the line, and
Right.
there's such big age gaps between.
Yeah, so it's, basically me, and then 3 years apart to Garrett, and then 6 after that for Hunter. And so like Hunter, actually, he got some great time with my family. And I think that his relationship with my parents is one totally different than mine because he grew up in a different house than I did in a way.
What is that? What do you mean by?
Well, I just in that, I think I have learned even too from my kids. Like you learn a lot of lessons with the first one, and you realize, oh hey, this worked, this didn't, or we made a big deal about this, and it's not that big a deal. And so I think like things were more relaxed, but in a good way.
Okay.
It's not like, and we joke like, oh, he got to do stuff we never got to do. Like we had so many more rules, but he also I think he is probably like closer friends to my parents just because it was just him for a long time.
Right, because everybody else was already off to college.
Yeah, and so it's funny, he will say something like to my dad, and me and Garrett, the older brother, will like look at him like, I can't believe you just said that to Dad. Like that was maybe disrespectful or something else, and like my dad will just laugh it off, and we're like, dude, well, I can't believe that, like Dad's different with you. And he's like, well, yeah, it was just us. So
the words you can't use,
right,
he can use,
right,
that kind of stuff.
Like, they were buddies in a way. So I think it'll be special. And each relationship with each kid will be different and special depending on the time period. But it will be sad that the older brothers are gone, but you'll get some focused time.
Do you feel like at any point, I know like subconsciously, but more consciously now that I've realized that I put a little bit more on the weight of the shoulders of my eldest than I do the other two, because I understand that inevitably he has a larger responsibility than the other two. Is that something that your parents did at all?
Oh yes, and I remember being so upset about it. And then
Did you want more responsibility, or you wanted
Well,
less?
I mean,
because you're not the eldest of the bunch, right?
Well, no, I am.
Oh, you're the eldest
Yeah,
brother.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So I used to be so upset when if me and my brothers were getting in a fight, they would say, well, it's your job to fix it. I'm like, well, he started it. And they're like, but you're the oldest.
I do that all the time.
So we expect for you to figure it out. And it frustrated me to no end, but it gave me a lot of good lessons, and I learned how to deal with difficult people. and that's a valuable lesson to learn, and if you don't learn that lesson, it's just going to keep coming back at you. So I think I do that with Avery, our oldest, and I expect more out of her. But there will be turns, where Avery's gone and now Addison is getting more responsibilities with the twins and things like that. So I think it's passed along.
I mean, I know for sure that like my eldest gets just so much more than the other two a lot of times, and he'll sometimes just be looking at me like, "Come on, dude! Like seriously? Why am I the one that's getting all of this BS, and the other two are the ones that have literally put a dumpster on fire or something?" And you're like,
I think if it comes with more reward, then it's a role that they'll relish.
It does come with more reward because not in the sense of like giving him stuff, but he has access to things that the other ones do not have access to because he is trusted on a different level.
But yeah, that's what I mean.
He understands on a different level. Like the movie Oppenheimer, he wanted to go see Oppenheimer. There was no way the other two were going to go see Oppenheimer, a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. No. But this 9-year-old made a lot of sense to take to Oppenheimer because I know who he is as a person. I'm like, you really are into this thing, aren't you? And like you kind of read about it and you did some research about it and you know who Robert Oppenheimer is. And it's just like, you're not just randomly walking into this going like, he blew up everything. You're like, no, this is a scientist and he knew Einstein and all of those. Like, all right, let's take you to this. So there's a level of freedom that is allotted with restriction. And I don't know if people get that, but I think that's the best way I can describe it is like you're restricted because you have more responsibility, but you have a lot more freedom because I will allow you to explore topics that are generally restricted to a child that's 9 years old.
Yeah, if he's trusted, it's different, And you know him and you expect a certain amount. So we just finished reading The Hobbit. Actually, I was reading it to the girls, and
how does that work? By the way, do all 4 of them? I know obviously one is a boy. You got 3 girls.
Who knows?
Are they into it at all?
The twins
so it's just the older ones.
Yeah, it's just the older 2. And so we got Avery a dictionary because Tolkien uses a lot of big words.
Oh yeah.
And so once we come to a word we don't know, she looks it up in the dictionary, and that teaches her the skill for that. And then we go through the story, and we finished it, and we've been watching the Hobbit movies, which are a little scary, especially for like a 5-year-old. So she's not allowed to watch it, but the 8-year-old is, because we trust her, because she takes on responsibilities, and because, like, for instance, when Joy was out of town this weekend, like she'd give the twins a bath, or she'd change their diapers, or she would crack the eggs and get stuff ready for breakfast. Like, they want to help, and when they pick up responsibility, we reward them for it.
Yeah, that's the other thing, that he's allowed kitchen access to a much larger degree than the other 2 are. Like, if Gev is in the kitchen doing something, I'm not really worried about it. If the other 2 are in the kitchen, I'm just like on pins and needles going like, are we going to burn this entire building down? Are we going to scorch Dallas today because of my error as a parent?
Right. It's hard letting them learn something because you're like, oh gosh, you were going to miss the whole frying pan with that egg. And you did miss. Okay, well, it was just a 60-cent mistake. We could fix that.
Yeah. I don't look at it like that. I look at it as just like how much time has been added to a simple task.
There's that too. There are moments where I'm like, okay, I'm going to take over just because we got to speed this up.
Life, but with every guest that I've had, it's always been the first episode is, I just want to get to know you, and even though we were neighbors and we're friends and all this stuff, it's like so much you don't know about a person until you put a microphone in front of them for some reason. The conversation changes, also because I'm genuinely in a role of listening. This is what I want to do. I'm interested in knowing what you're about to say. Doesn't matter what you're about to talk about. It's interesting to me. So it does change the dynamic a little bit. So episode 1s are always like, let's get to know you. And then whenever you feel like doing an episode 2, we can actually dive into full on what it means to be a man of medicine and all of that stuff. So, just put a pin in that because we're gonna come. We're gonna do episode 2s.
That's fine with me. Tuesdays and Thursdays are like my surgery days, and
all right,
someone always gets sick or something, or insurance doesn't approve it, so it's not unusual that we say, "Oh, hey, I got a couple hours. What are you up to?" Which, when I was a fellow, when we were living next to Lake Tahoe, it was great because with surgery canceled, you could go snowboarding. Here it's a little different.
Yeah, you definitely got a feel for what California life is like. Or were you on the Nevada side or the California?
We're on the Nevada side.
But I mean, you're right
That's
there. Really, it's not that big of a difference. Texas and California, huge difference. But Reno, Nevada versus the Reno that's on the California side or the Lake Tahoe side, you're like, oh, okay, I know exactly. Right. It's like it's the same thing. Yeah. You guys just put an arbitrary line and down the middle somewhere.
Gas is just a little bit more expensive. That's it.
Oh man, I was talking to somebody the other day and they're like, still paying $5+ a gallon for gas. And I was talking to a lady in Arizona today for insurance authorization, actually, for one of your patients. And she was like, yeah, we're like $4 something a gallon in Arizona. And I was like, we pay $3 something a gallon here. And she's like, how are you guys so much cheaper than the rest of us?
Because we make the gas.
Probably, yeah. We have a lot of the oil refineries here, right?
Yeah, well, and it gets cheaper if you go south. Dallas is pretty expensive as far as gas goes.
No shit. So like San Antonio would be cheaper? Mm-hmm. I was recently up north towards Amarillo. I went to Canyon, Texas. Yeah. Got an opportunity to talk to a guy named Texas Slim.
Who's that?
I didn't know who he was either until I was introduced to him, but he's part of ranchers in Texas. And you touched upon it with the fires that we had. So he's part of this coalition. They're doing something called the Beef Initiative, trying to just kind of bring more people to see what the beef industry actually is and what better farming and better techniques are, and a shift not to get rid of factory farming or industrialized farming, but more of a shift to, we know we need that to take care of the masses, but we should also be doing a lot more community-based farming and, local ranch stores and feeding kind of like a radius. And Texas is a great place to do that because, I can drive an hour in any direction and probably hit a ranch.
Well, and what a lot of people around here do is they buy a half a cow.
I've been hearing about that, and I got to figure out, how all that works and who to go in with.
Yeah, you go in with a couple families, and you get, either a quarter cow or half a cow, and, you got to get your freezer ready.
So are you part of this whole, do you do this?
So I have not done it because I don't have a freezer dedicated to it. I need,
I don't have one either.
I need a game freezer, basically. And what I've told because I've had a couple people ask me to do it, but I've been like, well, what if it's a bad cow,
Right.
What if he's just kind of tough and gross, you don't know.
I can solve that problem, definitely, with Texas Slim, because the whole rancher thing, if you really are genuinely interested in that, let me know and I can connect you guys, because that's kind of what they do is local farmers, local cows. You can get it cut, process the whole thing.
So are they similar to Good Ranchers at all?
Probably.
Because I think that's kind of one of the. It's basically cutting out the grocery store distributor and having family farms provide the meat, rather than going through all of the.
So that's genuinely what they're doing to a certain degree, and I think what their main focus is just kind of because he lives in Canyon, Texas, and he's like, listen, when I left this and went into the tech industry in Austin, it's because this was dying. You couldn't be a farmer anymore and sell locally and do the whole thing because the big box chains came in and they kind of just destroyed everything. Now there's this shift back into not factory farming, but community farming and community ranching, and being able to have Amarillo is not a small city. It's not massive, but it's not small. You can have the people of Canyon take care of all of Amarillo just because of their, they're close to it and they can produce enough in a year to take care of produce and milk and all the dairy and all the beef and pork and all that stuff. And he's just his whole idea is, how do we get back to having the farmers be independent again, be able to control their land and control what they're feeding their animals and get away from these antibiotics and all of this crap and have healthier food options. And his whole thing is if you actually understand it, it becomes cheaper in the long run to buy from a community-based kind of an operation versus the big factory farm, because he's like, you got to put into play of that's going to make you sick at some point. Then that sickness is going to translate into physician bills or medication, also usually in tandem to each other. And it's like, this is forever. Now you're going to be on this medication forever because you weren't consuming healthy food to begin with.
That's why wild game's good for you too.
Yeah. Which, again, we got to go hunting at some point so I can actually become a real Texan.
There you go.
I bought the damn guns. I just never actually utilized them. I went pig hunting one time, and that was an epic fail.
You don't want to eat those guys. They're disgusting.
Do you not know? Like the wild hogs and stuff?
I typically don't.
Why? What's the deal with that?
There's a lot of, I mean, they smell terrible, but they're just dirty and gross, and there's a lot of like tapeworms and other things in the cattle or in the pigs that aren't in like deer or turkey or other things. Right.
And that's for sure. I've heard the yellowtail and whitetail and whitetail and axis deer and all that stuff, like really, really healthy food.
Axis deer, so good.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Then it's free reign here, right? Like it's like a wild hog. You can hunt them 12 months out of the year.
It's not native to Texas.
They're Indian, right?
They are Indian. I think they're called chatal.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
There are more in Texas than there are in India, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And they breed all year round, and you can kill them on site, more or less.
Well, where do we go to get them?
Either a game ranch, or they are kind of running wild in certain parts. And so if you're lucky enough to have land where they've gotten out of their high fence areas and now are just reproducing the wild, that's the way to do it.
Got it.
And they sound totally different too. They travel in packs more than a whitetail do typically. So it's kind of like if you see them come onto your land, you're like, well, do I shoot them or do I get them to stay here?
Oh, interesting. Why would you want them to stay?
Well, so that you don't.
They'll populate your land and you just get a bunch more of them.
Right, exactly. Then you shoot one every once in a while, but
right, I get it.
Then there are also every once in a while deer that are exotic but pets that get loose. And my dad tells a story that he was out hunting and he was spreading corn, getting ready to jump in the deer stand, and an axis deer comes running out of the forest.
Okay.
And sticks its head in his corn bucket as he's throwing it out, and he's standing there, deer eating out of his hand, and he sees a collar on its neck. So it was basically like somebody's pet from a petting zoo that had gotten away.
Which is another thing that's like a big thing in Texas is like private zoos.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those. You ever been out to Fossil Rim?
I have not. You told me about this a couple of times because I remember you took the kids and Joy. You guys all went there, right?
Yeah.
One year for like a camping trip?
Yep. Well, and we actually bought an Airbnb out there.
You actually bought one out there? Oh, cool. Okay. And there's like all these fossils and like arrowheads and all this other stuff that you can find there, right?
Yeah. So there's actual dinosaur footprints like in the lake. It's kind of crazy. But then there's a game ranch that's just all sorts of wild exotic animals. They got cheetahs and rhinoceros, and you can't pet those guys. But they have giraffes that like stick their head into your car and eat out of your hand. And
I've always been against kind of like putting things in cages. I've never been a fan of that. I get like big game reserves.
Yeah.
Where it's like hundreds of acres of land and just animals are more or less free roaming and you're preserving them because they're an endangered species or something. But like having a private zoo, I hate that idea.
So how do you feel about SeaWorld?
I hate SeaWorld.
What?
Oh yeah, I'm not a fan. I've been to SeaWorld a couple of times.
The Blackfish train?
I'm not on any train whatsoever, but I genuinely believe that. Look, I'm not a big fan of prisons either.
Yeah,
I don't like the idea of jails and prisons. I get it for a certain subset of society that should be isolated from the rest of society because you propose a very big danger to society. That I understand, but if you screwed over the IRS, should you be doing 150 years? Probably not.
I don't really see what that gains any of the rest of us other than an expense.
Thank you. It gives us nothing as taxpayers. It gives you nothing to be sitting and rotting away for 150 years or some bullshit number that they came up with based on the amount of money that you defrauded or didn't pay in taxes or whatever it is. But like, it's not really helping society in any way. Now, you raped a bunch of kids. I would love to publicly execute you myself. I have
The
no
problem is,
qualms with that whatsoever.
as a society, we've decided that we also don't like forced labor. So then we just have detention centers that people sit in forever.
Yeah, that's the thing is like we say we got rid of slavery. We didn't. We just turned it into an institution now.
Yeah.
It's called prison. And it's called forced labor camps and all these things that like you didn't get rid of slavery, you just kind of like shifted the narrative.
Yeah.
And
Well, my argument for game ranches or SeaWorld or whatever else is that I think there are a lot of people that love these animals that wouldn't love them if there wasn't 5 whales that were stuck in whale prison at SeaWorld. So it engenders a respect and a love for these creatures that wouldn't be there otherwise.
But I gained more love and respect from watching nature documentaries and reading same National Geographic than I ever got from SeaWorld. And the reason for that was much, much broader exposure to like the Discovery Channel, versus SeaWorld. You have to actually go to a SeaWorld. Well, most of this country is isolated from SeaWorld.
Well, I grew up in San Antonio, so SeaWorld was down the street.
Right.
So.
I grew up in California, so like San Diego has its SeaWorld.
Yeah.
And so we're privileged in the sense that we had it very close to us. I'm hour and a half drive for me, probably 10 minutes for you. But if you don't, and that's like the majority of the country, your actual exposure to it is from, listening to David Attenborough talk about the mating ritual of the humpback whale.
Yeah,
or
Planet Earth is pretty epic. So
yeah, Planet Earth is great. There was another one that came out, Chimp Empire. Did you watch that one?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh my God.
And then Blue Planet, I think is the other one.
Blue Planet is amazing. And then there was another one, I can't remember the name of it, but it was all about the nocturnal habits of animals.
Huh.
Adam, that one is like better than anything that you've ever seen.
Between that and Dude Perfect, that's mostly what we watch.
It's so good to watch the nocturnal one because most animals, we were completely wrong about like hunting rituals and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Most animals hunt at night. And we didn't know this until this documentary kind of like, it was a multi-year. And that's the other thing is like, I didn't know this until I watched the making of some of these documents. They're like, hey, you sit there for like 3 years in the Antarctic waiting for this one polar bear to walk by and you get this shot if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, now I completely understand why it takes so long and why so seldom we get these really good nature documentaries. Because like it takes years and years of just waiting and not disturbing nature. That's the other thing. Is like they are doing their best not to screw with the habitat. Like Chimp Empire, it was 20 plus years that it took for them to actually kind of do this documentary by first getting to that habitat, second, learning everything they could, learning how to work around them so that they were not disturbing their way of life, to the point where the chimps see the humans now, but they completely ignore them. They're like just part of the shrubbery because they don't bring any food with them. They don't interact with them in any way. They don't help. They don't hurt. They don't do anything to
Nothing
disturb.
exciting about them.
Yeah, they do, like these. They're just people, and they have very stringent rules about. Joe Rogan actually brought on the guy that directed it or produced that documentary, and he was telling us like it's meticulous the amount of like protocols that we have to follow to make sure that we are not disturbing their way of life. X amount of feet away, you can't have certain types of food. You can't have colognes or deodorants on. There's so much that goes into being part of the facade versus being an active member. And he was also saying it took multiple years until they felt comfortable with us and just ignored us completely.
Yeah.
And you're just like, that takes a lot of dedication and work. And when I read about those things and watch those things, and I'm just like, maybe we are more exposed to the world abroad by these things than putting these animals in cages. Because I don't learn anything when I go to SeaWorld. You've got a dude with a fish making a whale jump around. But to actually see orcas when they hunt is a beautiful and magnificent thing to see, where they're working with one another and they actually have their own language and they have their call signals and they know how to attack and who plays what role. You're like, this is cool.
That's definitely cooler than jumping and catching the fish for sure.
I always feel bad when I see these poor animals jumping and catching the fish because I don't know, when I look into the eyes of an animal, it almost seems like I can peer into something more than just the physical form of that animal. Is it my you can call it God's creation, you can call it evolution, you can do whatever you want to justify the unknown, but I believe the soul is a real thing. And I don't think we're the only ones that have souls. I feel like all animals have souls. And when you look into the eyes of an animal, sometimes you get to peer into that. And for me, it's like I'm looking into pain. And it's pain induced by humans for our pleasure. And it sucks so much for me. But I know I'm not the majority here. I know I'm a minority. I know most people are like, put him in a damn cage. I want to go with my family and get the popcorn and see, Free Willy just jumping around and stuff. I get that. But
it's a fish. I'm just kidding. It's not a fish.
It's
so
not
much
at
more than
all,
that,
though. That's the thing. They're mammals and they're so smart. And they have these languages and they are older than we are. And they've existed for so long. And now we decided that because we are too dumb to understand them, we think we are superior to them.
There's a lot of truth to that too.
I get it. Look, there's a big difference between putting Finding Nemo into an aquarium and loving that thing and keeping a small aquarium in your house with some saltwater fish. Those are actual just like dumbass animals. They're just fish. I get that completely. And I also understand that dogs only exist to live in our homes. They wouldn't have in any other circumstance. Like, we bred them. Yeah. They don't exist in nature. I get that too. That's our doing. And you know this as an owner of a dog. The way you care about your dog is like a family member. They're, good dog owners don't neglect their dogs. They're just like, oh my God, Fluffy, like you get everything, like the best food and healthcare and all this stuff. Like, you're part of the family. I don't feel the same when I look at a lion in a zoo.
Yeah.
Or a whale in an aquarium, because I'm like, I know what your natural habitat is. It's the open ocean, which encompasses 60+% of the world that we know of.
Not a pool.
Yeah, and now I get it. It's big and maybe even the size of this damn building, but it's still a pool at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So I feel really bad, and I can't help the fact that I feel bad about seeing these animals caged. But I'm also a hypocrite because I'm okay with dogs, cats, and fish being kept inside of a home. The same way I'm also okay with like some people that have reptiles and stuff. I'm like, I get it. Lower life form, they're not that smart to begin with.
Yeah.
Have at it. But like whales and dolphins and lions and elephants and these animals that are just as old as we are, if not older, like evolutionarily speaking, and are very smart, but we just don't understand it, we shouldn't cage them. We don't have that right.
I won't. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, I get it. Again, like I said.
Run.
So let's just end it here. This was an awesome conversation. Thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, man.
We didn't get to learn a lot about orthopedic surgery, but we did get to learn a little bit about you today.
We will, though.
Yeah, we'll keep this an open-ended thing. Whenever you feel like doing an episode 2, just let me know. You're welcome to come by and just have more conversations. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Dr. Adam Wright, you can't follow him on social media. That's not what he wants to do. He's an actual orthopedic surgeon. God forbid, if you're in pain and you need anything, Plain Orthopedic Group, they're great at fixing you up when you have a problem.
That's right.
So hit them up. And Adam, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.